work will be remembered as one of the greatest moments of this planet.
Mr. Scout. I know you're still weighing whether to return to Lumon. But the mark I've come to know is happy.
Hello, is anyone there? Is the board on? It's Marquez from Macro...
What you all did was one of the most painful moments in the history of this company.
What the hell?
But the four of you have become known as the face of Severance reform.
Okay, so we're not in trouble?
I don't think so. Milchick said we're famous.
All of us equally, or one of us is like the star?
Now, if you feel that you can't go on.
So what the hell did you guys see up there?
It's not our world up there.
And your life is filled with much confusion.
My Audi's wife died a few years ago, except the woman is Miss Casey.
So what are you gonna do?
I gotta get her out of here.
Mark, your Annie said she's alive.
This is obscene.
I just want to be sure.
And your world around is crumbling.
Why did you do this? What is this all about?
Do you know something about Gemma?
Mark, there'll be no honeymoon ending for you.
The work will be remembered as one of the greatest moments of this planet.
You don't value them. You fear them. We fear no one.
I'm tightening the leash.
If we let this happen to Miss Casey, who's gonna step up when it happens to us?
Now. Goodbye, Marquez.
Wait!
My name is Miss Huang. It's my first day here as deputy manager. Mark W.
Why are you a child?
Because of when I was born.
Welcome all to another Severance Saturday. Severance Saturday is here, ladies and gentlemen. And tonight we are going to be diving into all things Severance, episode 6, entitled Attila. And boy, do we have a lot to discuss about this episode indeed. We had some really good scenes that were very satisfactory to see. Some people making some right decisions, finally, that we all wanted to see. Mark, hint, hint, Mark. And of course, we saw some rather disturbing scenes too in some parts of this episode as well that might have painted certain characters that we may have once liked in a little bit of a different light. So overall, I thought this was a very fun episode. I feel like Severance is continuing to kind of bring it every single week. There hasn't really been one episode yet that I can honestly say I didn't like that episode. I've really been enjoying every single episode so far. And yeah, we got a lot to discuss tonight, don't we, PM? What in episode 6?
Yes. Welcome, guys, to Sevy Saturday. We have so much to get into. This episode was just so packed with so many details. And like you stated, we finally got to see Mark coming clean, right? Which is something that we were all waiting for. I'm super excited to talk about the episode. It was one of my favorites.
Ooh, interesting. One of your favorite of the season so far. I like it.
Yeah.
I like that. It was good. I definitely enjoyed this episode a lot more than episode 5. Not that I didn't enjoy episode 5. I liked 5 too. But this episode, it was good. It just hit on so many different levels. Yeah, this episode felt like a hug. It did in some ways. It did kind of feel like a hug. After, a pretty grueling episode 3 and 4, where some really big things happened. And of course, episode 4, we had a devastating loss of Innie Irving. But episode 5 was a little bit more of a kind of aftermath episode. Let's see the aftermath of everything that happened on the Orbo. But now that we're in episode 6, it definitely seems like we're kind of back on course and progressing through the plot even more. And yeah, it was a good episode. Like you said, one of the highlights for me as well. We saw Mark and Helly kind of finally work everything out, and Mark finally come clean to Helly about what actually happened when Helena was pretending to be her, in particular on the Orpo. And I must say, it played out beautifully. I know we were a little bit worried there for a minute in terms
Yeah.
of will Mark and Helly ever be able to reconcile, with how things are playing out. But Mark coming clean was a big step towards that.
Oh, for sure. And yes, Esmeralda, I couldn't agree more. This episode did feel like a hug. That, along with Jeremy Eisenfire's new intro, just beautifully wrapped up together the essence of the episode. Which I have, once again, I have to give you a compliment that you don't like on that intro. It was so beautiful the way that it encapsulated the relationship and kind of like the episode. It does feel like a hug. And I think we all kind of needed that. We have been
Mhm.
talking about such dark topics because of where they kind of led us, right?
Yeah.
And I feel like they were comforting us. They kind of took us to a dark place, and now they were providing that much needed hug. So yes, Esmeralda, I completely agree.
Yeah, I like that. I like it how the episode was kind of, this episode was them kind of hugging the fandom after kind of gut punching us and doing everything else to us in the previous few episodes. Like after a gut punch, you need a hug every once in a while. So no, I like that. That's a really good way to describe it. It was good. It was good. A lot of stuff happened. We got some interesting progressions. I think we have some interesting foreshadowings and them definitely setting some very interesting scenes up to play out over the next few episodes. We finally got to the awkward ham dinner, which turned out to be nowhere near as awkward as I first expected it to be, although it did seem to take a little bit of a dark turn depending on how you. And depending on what you got out of that dinner, which we are going to dive into heavily, because I have definitely a few things to discuss and definitely want to get everybody's opinion on it as well. But let's say what's up to the chat, the awesome, awesome chat who comes and hangs out with us and dives into all of this craziness with us. Welcome, one, welcome all. So glad to see everybody here this evening. I hope everyone is enjoying their weekend on this Sevi Saturday. We got Rogue Prince in the house. We got Kiwi Skirt in the house. Welcome, welcome, one, welcome all. We got Lily in the building. Welcome, Lily. We got Xavier Anderson in the house. And Xavier had a really good comment and a really good theory on one of our recent live streams. And I know you and I were talking about it. And we
Yes.
thought that he just had some really interesting concepts and ideas. And Xavier always has really good ideas. And this is why I really enjoy our chat, because we really have such a great chat that has really good takes on things. And a little bit later on, we're definitely going to bring up Xavier's comment and would love to dive into it a little bit more. It's definitely worth a discussion. For
Oh, for
sure.
sure. For sure.
Yeah, it was a good comment. It was a very good comment. We got Casey in the house. What is up, Casey? Hi, all. Hope you're all having a nice weekend. Yes, I hope everybody is enjoying their weekend. Hope everybody is enjoying this Sevi Saturday. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We got Captain Cardwell in the house as well. Welcome, Captain. We got Chris Smalls in the building. What is up, Chris Smalls? Good to see you as well. We got Chris Stan in the house. What is up, Chris Stan? We got Megan in the house as well. Megan Alyssa, welcome. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We got Abby in the building as well. Welcome, Abby. So glad to see each and every one of you here. We got Peach in the house as well. Welcome, Peach. We got Dread State in the building. Missing Koblig. Koblig.
Belvig.
I do. Kobel Vig. Jeez, why can I not speak tonight? Oh my God. No, I am too. Like I really am too. I was hoping we were going to get at least a little glimpse of Cobell in this episode, because a lot of people have been pointing out we haven't seen Cobell in quite a few episodes. So I was hoping we were going to get something small to see what she's been up to this whole time. But hopefully that will come in episode 7. But what about you? Are you missing Cobell or Cobell Vig?
Exactly. Just like one of our surveys, 88 Key says, more cowbell. We need more cowbell, more cowbell. I'm imagining, when we see her next, she's gonna have been living in her vehicle for a while. unless she has found accommodation. So I'm wondering how she's doing. Hopefully she's okay. I'm definitely missing her for sure. Yeah.
I am. I must say I am. She's a very interesting character, and she's kind of part of the fabric that is Severance. So to see so many episodes go by with us not kind of touching base with her and seeing her progression and what her storyline, where her storyline is taking her, yeah, it definitely has been noticeable. I mean, it's been quite a few episodes now where we've gotten not a single Cobell scene. So yeah, hopefully she comes back soon because we know she's definitely going to be in other episodes. Anyone who saw the preview, the trailer for season 2 of Severance, there's quite a few Cobell scenes and quite a bit of Cobell dialogue in the trailer that we haven't seen in any of the episodes yet, which of course means those scenes are still yet to come. Like Cobell telling Mark famously, Mark, there will be no honeymoon ending for you. And we haven't seen that yet. That's got to be coming up soon. Poor
I have to
Mark.
say, I love how you imitate her voice because it's that elongated. I couldn't put my like finger on what it was about her voice, but it's that
Mhm.
elongated, like Mark. I love that.
It is. It's yeah. It's got that elongated kind of sound to it, and I really like the voices of some of the characters on the show. Like I remember we talked once in a while about Irving, like the way Irving speaks
Mhm.
too. I love the way Irving speaks, so kind of proper and sophisticated. It's almost like it's an American British accent. It's I
Mhm.
like the accents and the dialogue of a lot of the characters. Milchick too, and I know Milchick kind of got in a little bit of trouble for it recently in
Mm.
his performance review. But I've always loved the way Milchick talks and the way his vocabulary, how he chooses to describe things, which sounds just totally different from anybody I've ever heard. I've always liked that about his character, so I'm hoping that's not something that he gives up. It looks like in this episode he's kind of visibly trying to train himself to speak
Mhm.
different, to kind of dumb down his words in a sense, to water down what he says. And
Yeah.
I don't like that. I want Milchick to stay Milchick.
Yeah, uh, I mean that is something that I liked about him, his professionalism and
Yeah.
also his culture. He was very culture, very refined. His vocabulary amazing. So I did like that about him. But I have to say, I enjoyed the monologue of when he is looking in the mirror and the way that he
Yes.
says like "grow, grow." It's so
Yeah.
spoken word poetry. It was
Ah.
so heartfelt. It was so emotional. And his voice, his raspy voice, as he's screaming, grow, grow. It was very moving. So even
Mhm.
though he's kind of removing some of the vocabulary, maybe the words, the big words, quote unquote, from his language, I still feel like he has that like strength in his speech. When he speaks, you listen. So he's perfect
Mhm.
for this role because he does command respect.
You're right. He really is perfect for this role, and Trammell Tillman been killing it. He really has been killing it as Milchick, to the point where I really want to start seeing him in some other roles. Like he's a really good actor. But like you said, in terms of his presence, that commanding presence, he does have that. He has that kind of commanding screen presence that not every actor has. I feel like that's not something you can kind of teach an actor to have. Either they have that presence or they don't. It's not something that can be taught. And he has it. Like he has it very well, where you do listen to what he says. When he says something, it does kind of come through. It does leave an impression. I imagine, you meeting someone like Milchick, that's never a meeting you're ever going to forget. You're always going to remember the day I met
Hmm.
Milchick because he's just that unique.
Yep.
He's a great character. He really is a great character, and becoming one of my favorite actors on the show as well. We got Esmeralda. Hello from Orlando. What is up, Orlando? That is awesome to see. It's always cool to see where people are tuning in
Hmm.
from, and I'm always incredibly surprised to see where people are tuning in from. And because when we end up seeing people just literally all over the country and all over the world, even sometimes. So I'm always super. It's always super interesting to see where people are tuning in from. But yes, hello back to Orlando, Esmeralda. Welcome, welcome, welcome. We got Joan R in the house as well. What is up, Joan R? We got Bill Chill in the house. What is up, Bill Chill? Good to see you. Milkshake about to go full postal. I hope he doesn't have a gun. I hope not. I hope not. And yes, Milkshake, he is. I mean, visibly, incredibly visibly shaken he was in this episode, all throughout the episode, when he's just nonstop thinking about his performance review. That performance review really did shake him to his very core, to the point where he seems to be, fundamentally readdressing everything about himself in hopes of probably becoming that perfect boss that Lumen does want him to be. I imagine it was a very tough thing for Milchick, for someone like Milchick, to hear the performance review that he did get from Mr. Drummond, and seeing all of these trivial things being labeled as complaints, whether it's the improper use of paper clips, using too big of words. Like, it's just, it seems like that performance review really, really got to him. And it looks like, yes, I do think we're going to see Milchick losing it a little bit, maybe becoming a little bit more, I don't want to say full on unhinged, but Milchick was always one of those characters that kept everything very kind of tight. He never really had emotional outbursts or anything. He was very much in control of his own faculties most of the time. And I wouldn't be surprised if we start seeing that slip just a little bit. Because again, this performance review really rocked him. I mean, to the point where even his hands wouldn't stop shaking.
Yeah. Yeah, I felt so bad for him. It's difficult to see such a strong person being so upset. His hands were shaken. He was also doing the paperwork in such a close environment. Instead of sitting at his desk, he almost needed to retreat to this very small like closet space. The lights are, not as bright as they are in his office. So he's kind of like retreating and trying to calm himself down. It almost seems like his hands are shaking. And he goes over, he looks at his review packet, and then practices, has the mirror and the little lamp, and practices becoming what they want him to become. And I
Yeah.
was thinking about the setup that he has there, and it tells me that this is something he does regularly, because he
Yeah.
already has the mirror set up, he has his little lamp. So this is something that he maybe a ritual, maybe, that as he's
Mm.
working on himself, he goes and does this regularly. um but I just felt so bad. I rewatched this specific scene a couple of times because I
Mhm.
thought I saw kind of a teardrop forming, and it does almost seem like he's gonna cry when he's screaming
Yeah.
at himself, grow, grow.
Mm.
You must leave childish things behind. Which then again, it reminds me of the Bible verse of growing up and leaving childish things behind to become a man.
Yeah.
So moving.
Yeah, and again, I love that, because we see that kind of theme woven throughout the entire episode, the theme of growth. And not even just this episode. I mean, you and I have talked about numerous times about how season 2 in particular, the whole season seems to be a journey of growth for these characters, where season 1 was their childhood, and season 2 is them growing into adolescence, according to at least how the creator of the show describes it. Season 2 is their adolescent years, them growing up and discovering themselves, finding out who they are. And yes, the theme of growth was very prevalent in this episode, from Milchick to Mark finally evolving and growing a little bit enough to kind of get the courage to come clean to Helly, with Helly kind of having some growth of her own, and having a second there where the grief does hurt her for a little bit. It does floor her for a little bit, to the point where we end up seeing her kind of almost in the fetal position, as you mentioned. But
Hmm.
eventually, she grows through it, and she goes through it, and she ultimately remembers who she really is. The Helly that always takes charge and doesn't wait for others to make decisions for her. So yeah, I feel like we saw a lot of really good growth in this episode from a lot of our characters. Definitely. Awesome stuff. Oh, let's see what we got. We got $10 from Kristan. Thank you so much, Kristan. Unpronounceable. Thank you so much. Very much appreciate that. Keep up the great work. Enjoying my first live. Well, that is awesome. Wow, congratulations. That is so
Yay.
awesome. Holy cow, your first live. I am super honored. I must say, I am super honored that you chose to come and hang out with us here for a little bit on this fine, fine Sevi Saturday. And thank you so much for the support. It's very much appreciated. We love diving into these topics. We love this show and seeing where it's going and what's happening with these characters. And we are here every Saturday diving into all of this stuff. So thank you so much for catching your first live stream here, and welcome to Sevi Saturday. And thank you so much for the support. Very
Yeah, and I
generous.
love your name. I love the unpronounceable. So cute.
I like it. That's
Very
good. That is
clever.
good. That is pretty good. Thank you. Thank you so much for the 10. That is incredibly generous of you. Wow. Thank you. Yeah, this is I really enjoy these discussions. They're always a ton of fun to see where this thing is going to go. Always love hearing from you guys in the chat. And as I continue to say what is up to people in the chat, sound off in the chat, guys. Let us know what you thought. Did you enjoy episode 6? Did you not enjoy episode 6? What were some of your favorite scenes from episode 6? Or what were some of your least favorite scenes from episode 6? We want to know what you guys think. What did you guys like? What did you not? We always love hearing from the chat. Very much so. Severance has been on fire. Yes, it has been.
Mhm.
It's been good, I must say. Season two is always tough. When a show has a really good first season, more often than not, a season 2 will come around and it won't always quite match up with how good season 1 was. But I mean, just for me personally, up until this point, I do feel like season 2 is matching up to season 1 in terms of the quality
Mm.
of the storytelling.
Oh yeah, for sure. What I like about season 2 is that there is a difference. Like we kind of have stated before, it is getting a little bit darker, right? And the
Yeah.
creator, he had that in mind when he wrote the second season, Dan Erickson.
Yeah.
However, the way that they introduced the dark topics to us was in such a um like minimal way, where we started off with the Severance that we knew. It wasn't super different, but each episode things got a little bit darker. The topics became a little bit more serious, so it was easy to accept the changes in the show because it was so gradual.
Mhm. It was, and it was pretty gradual, and I think that's a perfect way to describe it. You're 100% right. It wasn't one of those things where season 2 came around and they just completely threw us into the deep end out of nowhere. It was a gradual build up to it where you look at the first 2 or 3 episodes of season 2, and it does kind of share a very similar tone to season 1. It kind of just picks up where it left off. And then, yes, we slowly see them kind of upping the stakes, upping the ante from episode to episode to episode, where they are starting to show us darker things. They are starting to show us that the innies are experiencing, real world, real life problems that people go through on a day-to-day basis. So I do really
Mhm.
enjoy the creator kind of describing it that way, where season 1 was their childhood and season 2 is them growing into adolescence, because we are very much seeing that reflected on the show. They're dealing with real problems for the first time, and some of them are handling them well, and some of them are handling them not so well. And I think it's going to be interesting to see how that continues to progress with our innies, and where ultimately is this journey going to take them, because they are on a journey of discovery this season, it seems like.
Mhm. Oh, I like that. A journey of discovery. And with that in mind, the picture that you have up is a perfect example. The chat was commenting on what a great picture this is. This was kind of like the romance episode. There was
Yeah.
so much like romantic storyline, right? And plot development happening. And when you say, discovering what life is like, right? Going through those experiences, it was quite sweet to see Helly and Mark kind of like living that experience, right? Of being physical
Yeah.
for the first time. And the way that they filmed it was so great, I thought, because it was very innocent. Not only was it innocent, but it was not lost on me that we were talking about consent. Like just an episode ago, we were all talking about consent, pretty dark topics, and about the lack of consent. But when they filmed the specific scene, you get Helly asking Mark, "Is this something you want?" He then says,
Yes.
"Yes. Would you like this?" And then you get Mark asking Helly, "Yes?" question mark, and she says yes. So they
Yeah.
kind of like really focus on both of them asking each other, "Are you okay with this?" Which I thought was such a contrast to what happened with Elena.
That's a really good point. It really is a complete kind of 180 night and day difference between Mark and real Helly's intimate relations and him and Helena. It was totally different. This did seem a little bit more innocent. It did seem a little bit more just natural, and the chemistry was there. And yeah, it does. It goes back to both, giving consent, of course, and both of them kind of rediscovering themselves. I feel like Helly really kind of rediscovers who she is in this episode. Now, let's backtrack just a minute. Of course, the episode does start off pretty early on, where Mark finally does come clean. He comes clean to Helly and tells her everything that happened on the Orpo, what Helena really did with her body. And I think a lot of us wanted him to come clean. I think him not coming clean in episode 5 definitely wasn't the best look for him. I understand there was some initial shock there, and he was a victim too, and all that. But he ordered the truth. So I'm really glad that he did come clean to her. And seeing Helly's response, her reaction to it, was pretty interesting. And I know you and we talked a little bit about this before the episode aired, in terms of that I wouldn't have been too surprised, or at least I wasn't too surprised at all, that Helly wasn't exactly heartbroken. She wasn't exactly
Hmm.
distraught. Like, yes, she was upset, of course. How could she not be? But it was almost like she was a little bit more angry than anything. Angry at
Yeah.
Helena for taking that from her. She stole her first time with Mark, which is something she can never get back. And I think that was Helly's, one of her biggest motivations for her kind of getting up off the floor and saying, no, I'm not going to have this other person's memory. I want my own
Hmm.
memory. And I think we saw Helly kind of rediscover who she is in this episode. Because at one point, she gets the news and it sends her into a grieving process, which is
Yeah.
completely understandable, to the point where we see her down. She's a little bit out. She's a little bit broken here. But then out of nowhere, all of a sudden, she remembers this. She remembers her first kiss with Mark, and how she is always the person who takes charge. She is always the person who makes the decisions. She is always the person who doesn't let anyone tell her what to do. I feel like her sitting there and remembering this was her almost remembering who she was, remembering that this is the
Hmm.
kind of person she is, the one to not wait around and let someone else make the first move. She's going to make that first move herself. And then she goes on to repeat that once again as she goes up to Mark and says, no, I don't want her memory in my head. I want my own memory.
Hmm.
It was Telly taking charge of her own destiny again.
Yeah. Yeah, and I have to say, Jeremy Eisenfire never ceases to amaze me. I was really impressed by the fact that when you put out your video for the recap of episode 5, you mentioned the biggest issue with what had transpired being that Elena took something from Helly she could never get back. And I feel like a lot of us Sevis, we kind of went super dark. We were talking about what happened without consent and how dark that was and what it could possibly mean for the relationship. But the fact that you just left it as looking at it from a simplified way of what Helly, not us, but what Helly would feel. And
Yeah.
the fact that that is exactly what I saw on screen, I was very impressed by you, because that was her issue. Her issue was after she thought about it, she went through the grieving process, right? We see her with denial, anger, bargaining, depression.
Yeah.
She even
Yeah.
kind of cries a little bit, and then acceptance. This is what happened to me. I won't allow it to destroy us. I want my
Yeah.
own experience and taking control. So I thought it was just amazing. And I think it kind of speaks to knowing your characters, right? You have to know
Hmm.
them in order to know their motivation and what's actually going to bother them. So I was quite impressed by you, but also by Dan Erickson. I mean, he took our nicest relationship that we had, he plunged it to the depths of hell with some dark consent stuff, some like non-consensual like sexual relationships, and then he dragged it out of hell and put it back on plain field where it was very sweet. Even the way that
Hmm.
he tried telling her at the beginning, like instead of saying, he didn't want to say we had sex, so he's like,
Yeah.
we shared
We shared a
vessels.
vessel.
Which is a Rickon thing, because
Yeah.
they love Rickon, and he wrote that book, the UUR, in which he
Yeah.
discusses sexual relationships quite a lot. So I'm
Hmm.
sure that that was a Rickon quote. We shared
Yeah.
vessels.
Yeah.
It was endearing and kind of cute, and it was back to the Mark that we know, the sweet any Mark. Um, and then he finally has to say like we had sex when she's not getting it. And I think that's the denial phase of the grieving
Yeah.
period, that he
Yeah.
said that and she's like, no, not with me, not with me.
Yeah. Yeah. It was, and that's the thing. We see like you mentioned, the whole 12 stages of grief. We hear Audi Mark mention it at the very beginning of the episode, talking like you just said, talking about bargaining, how he had got to the bargaining phase where if you could bring my wife back, I'll do this. If you could only bring my wife back, I will do this. It's that bargaining stage. And yes, after Helly does get that kind of news, it does seem like she goes through a little mini kind of 12 steps of her own there before finally getting back to the point of realizing who she is and essentially taking her life back by creating her own memory with Mark and not letting her life be ruled by this memory that Helena stole from her. So we do see the 12 stages of grief kind of playing a part in the episode beyond Mark simply mentioning them. So that is a good point. It's a very good point. And I
Yeah.
totally agree with you. When you brought that up the other night, I thought it was spot on, that vessel. Mark, like, how would any Mark even know to refer to it as that unless he saw it in the URU book? I 100% think you're right. Mark
Yeah.
says we shared a vessel. I 100% think he saw that in the URU book. I think you're spot on with that one. So that was a great one on your part. I mean, it's just so Rickon, a vessel.
Mm.
Like, it's just so Rickon to speak like that. We shared a
Super
vessel.
Rickon.
Um, Great line. Absolutely
Super
great line.
Rickon. And now, chat, you have something to say to your romantic partner next time.
There
We
you
share
go.
a vessel. Never heard that before, but it was very endearing the way that he tried explaining it to her in that way. What I also
Mhm.
love about the scene is the way that it was filmed, where she is in the corner of the bathroom. And once she realizes, when he makes it clear, and we get through that, we share a vessel sort of thing, once she
Mhm.
understands and he says we had sex, the camera focuses in on Helly, and you're
Yeah.
really close to her, and it blurs out Mark, and it makes you feel what Helly would feel like at discovering such a thing, where you could
Yeah.
still hear him but you
Mhm.
can't really see him anymore because you're trying to process the information and what just happened, right? I thought they did an elegant, brilliant job at showing what it must feel like to get such a revelation without taking it to the dramatic, the super dark. I think that it was very plain and beautiful in the way that it was plain, because we were all wondering, right, chat? How is he going to tell her, and how is it going to go?
Yeah, exactly. How's it going to end up? Because I think a lot of us were worried, or at least maybe a few of us. I know you and I discussed it a little bit in terms of being worried
Hmm.
that if she finds out from somebody else and doesn't hear it from Mark herself, that is going to ruin them. They probably wouldn't have been able to recover from that. It seems like they're able to recover pretty nicely from what Helena did after Mark finally comes clean to her himself,
Mhm.
which was the right move. Hearing that from somebody else would have probably killed her even more, I would imagine. Um, but yeah, they seem to be in a good place. They seem to be in a very good place, obviously, considering how things ended up. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, it's just the show, like you said, the show has definitely anteed up. It has leveled up a bit. It is kind of diving into a little bit more of these darker things. Not darker, but just real world problems, real world, real life problems that innies would 9 times out of 10 never even be exposed to because they just simply don't have an opportunity to see any of this because they're stuck inside the
Mhm.
office all day. But we're seeing even real world, real life problems can even happen to innies inside an office setting. Like it's, nobody is exempt from growing up
Yeah.
and facing how the world really is.
And really, I like that you bring that up because that's a great point, and it takes us to the topic, right? Um,
Mhm.
I like that they set up the episode of we're gonna set it up in a way where Mr. Milkshake is busy. He's not watching
Yeah.
the innies. Usually he has more control of the innies, but they let us know from the beginning he's gonna be busy. It's Mini Milkshake who is in charge. And Mini Milkshake is not using Mr. Milkshake's desk. He says you could sit at your regular desk. So
Yeah.
I assume that she doesn't have the ability to oversee them as much, right?
Mhm.
Which is why they were able to go and into that empty office space and make a little tent. She's like, here's a tent. Trying to make it as nice for him as Elena made it, I guess, in a way, which was very like sweet of her, right?
Mhm. Yeah.
And it that only happened in an office space because they were not watching them. So all the innies were kind of like running around doing things that are not appropriate for the office. Um, and I like that they gave us a reason as to why that happened. So we're not wondering how can
Mhm.
you not be paying attention to them or watching them? Where's the cameras, right?
Yeah. Yeah, it was pretty interesting. Yeah, he kind of relinquishes control to her, and you do get the sense that is this a test for her? Is this to see how she can handle, you want my job so bad, let's see if you can handle it for a day kind of thing. I mean, because that's one thing I liked about that scene in the beginning between Milkshake and Mini Milkshake. He calls her into the office, and clearly he knows that it was her who levied these complaints
Hmm.
against him. He must know it was her. He has to know no severed employee is going to complain to the Lumen board that he's using paper clips the wrong way or that he's using too big of words. That's not going to come from a regular severed employee. So Milkshake had to know right off the bat that it was Mini Milkshake who levied all these complaints. And it was just so interesting the way he kind of calls her in there and the way he's kind of imparting onto her the exact same lesson that he himself wants to learn, that he himself is going through this episode. It's kind of, do as I do kind of thing, where he's telling her to put away your childish folly. I'm the only one who can pass you through this fellowship kind of thing, exerting a little bit of his power over her and
Hmm.
reminding her that you need me to succeed. You can't just jump over me and get my job kind of thing. And yeah, he ultimately relinquishes control to her of the severed floor for a day. And like you said, we see the innies start running wild. It's like the substitute teachers. It's like you show up to
Yeah.
school in the morning, and the substitute teacher's there, and it's like, okay, we can do whatever we want today. It had that feeling. It did have that feeling. Yeah.
Yeah, Mini Milkshake. Um, she goes in there, and I love Mini Milkshake's little smile. He says, "I had my review," and she gives
Mhm.
him this evil little smile, like, "How did it go?" Wanting to know, like, "You got in trouble. I know you got in trouble," and I like how he reminds her, for in order for you to pass this fellowship, and to be deemed winter tide material, I have to pass you. So it's really up to me. Like, you're not doing yourself any favors, really, by plotting against me, right?
Yes.
And
Yeah.
she does kind of seem to get it. Like in this still that you have here, it really does kind of dawn on her that she might have messed up with Milkshake. She needs him.
Yeah.
So she better stay on his good side. Um, and you and I were talking, right, about Mini Milkshake in specific. Now that we got more information as to fellowship and wintertide material, I think that now we could derive that she is from the Kier School of Girls, right?
Yes. Yes, I think you're right. I think, I mean, it just seems like that would be fitting, no? Like if she did come from this school, we know that Miss Cobell went to the Myrtle Egan School for Girls, and that's how Cobell became so close to the company because she was around it ever since she was a child. I know there's also theories out there that that a lot of people think Cobell is an Egan or maybe half Egan in part of her lineage, maybe, which could definitely be possible. But yeah, I mean, because we've always wondered how would a child like Minnie Milkshake get a job like this on the severed floor, such an incredibly important job with high security clearance where some of their most sensitive work is being done. How does a child get this job? But if she was part of the school and has been there for a while and was like a prodigy up and coming, or potentially maybe
Hmm.
even had parents that also work at Lumen high up, that could definitely explain it. So I agree with you. I think that was a really good connection. Her being a part of the school probably makes sense. We heard that she was a crossing guard before she came here. Maybe she was a crossing guard
Hmm.
for this school for the kids.
Yeah, for the school. And it makes sense because a lot of times you have the children, right, take on these little roles to try to learn skills. And it also
Hmm.
makes sense as to why she would be allowed in an office setting during school hours because this
Yeah.
is her school time. What she's doing is she's in this fellowship and she's learning the skills that they think will provide her with what she needs for her future. I do see the chat talking about the barrettes. So she did the hairdo with the two little pigtails, and then today last episode, right? She had barrettes. I thought they were quite cute. You guys are not fans? I see the
Mm.
chat is kind of divided on the barrettes there. I like them.
Divided on her barrette, on her hairstyle. Yeah, they've seemed to be changing her hairstyle for every single episode lately. It's every
Hmm.
episode it's a new hairstyle. I don't I guess for me it's one of those things that I haven't paid crazy a close attention to. But no, that's interesting that yeah, some people are liking her hairstyles and some people aren't, it seems. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I'm not sure if I like or dislike it. She's just mini milkshake to me, I guess. Just
Mini
mini
milkshake.
milkshake.
And I
Yeah.
think the hairdo, when we think about the new hairdo and the styles that they're giving her, it is to kind of make it striking and to make it
Yeah.
disturbing for us because we do
Hmm.
kind of get used to seeing Minnie Milkshake at the office. But when they put her in these barrettes and pigtails, it reminds us that she's just a little girl and she shouldn't be there, that there's something fundamentally wrong, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
As that worker says, like, why are you a child?
Yeah. Exactly. That's a very good point. We hear the question asked right from the very beginning. Why are you a child? Why is a child on this severed floor in a high managerial position? Like there's something very strange going on here. And I did think that was a very interesting direction that the show decided to go in. Obviously, with them promoting Milchick to Cole Bell's position and him becoming the new head of the severed floor, then yes, obviously that means he needs a second in command. Someone needs to fill the position he was previously in. I guess I just never anticipated or expected it to be a 12-year-old child, I guess. I don't know.
Mhm.
Strange. Very strange. Um, but yeah, the Barrettes are giving childish folly, says Forever
Mhm.
Autumn. Maybe, yeah, maybe that's it. Miss Huang's hair's on point. So yeah, it seems like it is kind of torn. We got some people who like the Barrettes and some people who don't like the Barrettes, which is again totally fine. We love hearing everybody's opinion here. That is what we love to do. That's what these discussions are for. We want to know what you guys think. What did you guys like? What did you not like? Always definitely sound off for sure. Yeah, the Barrettes are my are the least of my worries. And yeah,
Peach.
I mean, That's a good point, Peach. There are a lot of other stuff to dive into, but yeah. But again, of course, all opinions are welcome here for sure. And one scene, her hair looked like devil horns when Helena got off the elevator. Oof, interesting.
Mm.
Interesting. Helly gives me the feeling that all Eagans are really strong-willed with big personalities. I imagine a lot of them are, Dave. Yeah, I think that's probably a safe bet. I think I agree with you. Just growing up the way that Eagans grow up, growing up with this, in this company, we see how Helena grows up and how she, even how her own father is with her, how her own father even uses her as a corporate pawn and doesn't treat her as much as a daughter as he does an employee. So I imagine it's very tough to grow up in that kind of setting where you don't have that kind of that normal family
Mhm.
structure of feeling like you have love. It's really just all about the business. It's all about Lumen, especially the way the Eagans are. They're not your average everyday corporate family. They're incredibly
Mhm.
strange and cooked, and it's more run like a religious organization than it is a business. And then, of course, we know that they also have genetic issues that could be happening to them as well, considering Kier was essentially a product of incest at the end of the day.
Mhm.
So, yeah, I imagine growing up in Egan is one of those things that they probably all have very big, boisterous personalities, but I imagine a lot of them are also very insecure at the end of the day as well, kind of like Helena is.
Yeah. And I saw the chat. I love your chat. They know all. But I saw
Chat's
somebody
the
in the
best.
chat said, with Elena's behavior, she is indeed a fetid moppet. The way that she behaves, what she's doing. Her dad was awful for saying that, but they are kind of awful people. She is kind of, she's acting like a fetid moppet. So maybe he does know his child. Father knows
Maybe.
daughter.
Maybe he knows. Maybe he knows the fetid moppet comment was accurate at the end of the day. But yeah, Milkshake and Mini Milkshake, really interesting dynamic there between them, and it does seem like they are at odds a little bit. But man, it was just so strange to see Milkshake so out of character in this episode because he is usually someone who is pretty confident. He's pretty sure of himself. He doesn't usually at least project the feeling of insecurity much. Like he usually does seem like he's got his eye on the ball kind of thing. But this episode, it seemed like he was just completely out of his skin. Like he was just a completely different Milchick. Where again, this performance review really did bother him. It really bothered
Mhm.
him on a very deep, deep level. It felt to the point where, yes, like you said, he's not even in his office. He's in this weird back storage room doing everything he can, frantically putting paper clips together the right way just to kind of redeem himself in the eyes of this performance review. Like it really, really hit him hard getting this negative of a review, where I imagine maybe he just wasn't expecting the review to be this bad. Maybe he wasn't expecting for these small things to affect him as much, like the improper use
Mhm.
of paper clips or using too big of words. Maybe he wasn't expecting those kind of complaints to affect him as much as they ultimately did, because they are small complaints. But Lumen does present them in a way where these are two of your biggest points of contention. So they really mess with Milchick's head. I feel doing that performance review where we see the aftermath of it in this episode, and like you mentioned earlier, we're seeing him even not able to control his hands. He's literally shaking because he's so flustered and so bothered about what this review
Mhm.
did to him. Um, so that was very interesting to see Milchick just in this state. He's usually not in this kind of state. It was very out of character for him to be behaving this way, to be so affected the way he was.
It was difficult to see, honestly. It was difficult to see him affected in this way because we don't think of him as somebody who gets affected by things, right? He's always in control. He always has that smile that tells you, I can handle this. I will figure it out. I can solve anything. And to see him so affected and actually when I think about it, what he was saying to Mini Milkshake he was saying to himself as he screams in the mirror, right? Grow, grow, leave childish things behind. He was telling her, you are getting hung up on these issues, paper clips and big words. You need to leave that childish mentality behind because you want me to graduate you from the fellowship, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so he was kind of saying the same thing to himself, saying, you're getting hung up on paintings that are
Yeah.
offensive to you, on being offended by the review or the feedback. Grow up.
Mhm.
The job is what you need to focus on. Grow up and stop getting hung up on who you are or on kindness reforms. Do the job, do what needs to get done. That's all that matters. Kind of like be more like Natalie. She doesn't get hung up on tiny
Yeah.
little things like that. Grow up, Milkshake. I felt like he was telling himself in the mirror, like, grow up, let it go. Don't get hung up on this. Um, and listening to the feedback and trying not to let that affect him. And when I looked at the numbers, right? After the episode, Dan Erickson always does like a behind the scenes sort of look, and he talks a little bit about the episode, and he has said about Milkshake representing, you know, the experience of African American men in the workplace and
Mhm.
in management. And when you look at the numbers, it's only 3% of African Americans that make up people in high up their positions. So you must imagine that must be super isolating, and it must
Yeah.
require so much of you to get to that position because it's only 3%. And I feel like we got to see behind the experience of how you get there, how something happens that affects you, and how you have to shed that, those feelings, those emotions, so that you could keep going.
Mhm. Yeah. It's and I like how you put that with Natalie. It's like we see Natalie. I wonder if she started off in a similar position as Milchick, where maybe she just progressed to the point where she learned to kind of just slap on that smile and deal with it. Did she have these same struggles when she was coming up, when she was first at Lumen and first getting put in high positions? Did she kind of go through a similar phase that Milchick is going through himself now? It's yeah. I mean, it was just out of character for him to kind of just appear this shaken and this out of sorts. It just didn't feel like our usual milkshake that we know and love, or maybe not love. I know not everybody loves him, but yeah, it's going to be interesting to see where he goes forward from this because we have, and I like how you brought up earlier how he's got the mirror set up with with the light, almost like this is something he does on a regular basis. Like he comes to this mirror often whenever he's maybe feeling some kind of feeling of doubt, some kind of insecurity. I like that.
Mhm.
I like the idea of him kind of constantly coming to this mirror over and over and over again anytime he's in a vulnerable state to try and snap himself out of it. It's like it's his own little space to kind of decompress and move on and work through things. So I like that. I because it's almost it was hidden too. He's got these
Mhm.
folders in front of it. He has to move the folders around to expose the mirror and the light. So I like the idea of him kind of constantly coming back to this thing and using it as a tool to ultimately get past things and deal with things emotionally. But I want to see what kind of Milchick we're going to see going forward. I guess how is he going
Yeah.
to after trying to grow up the way that he did, grow, grow, grow. We see him trying to shorten the way he talks. He's already trying to use smaller words. We already see he's trying to use paper clips the right way. He's trying to right all of the wrongs that were in his performance review because again, it does seem like Lumen kind of shook him to his core with this performance
Mhm.
review. So I want to see what kind of milkshake we're going to get going forward. And is he going to continue to get more and more strict? Is he going to continue to start to behave a little bit more like Cobell every day? Because that was one of
Mm.
his things. He didn't want to be Miss Cobell. He says, I'm not Miss Cobell, to the point where he's even introducing things like kindness reforms and stuff like that. He seemed like he genuinely wanted to be a different boss. He didn't want to be just another Cobell. But it seems like Lumen doesn't want that. It doesn't seem like that's the kind of boss Lumen is looking for, as they kind of Drummond was pretty clear that he needs to kind of tighten it up. He needs to tighten the noose in a sense. And Milchick agrees to do that. And then we see him this visibly shaken afterwards. Yeah, I wonder how strict is Milchick going to get? Are we going to continue to see Milchick try, kind of turn a little bit more into Cobell now, before he does ultimately realize that he has made a huge mistake, that he is playing with the wrong team? I do think he'll eventually get there. I do think he will eventually have a redemption arc, but I don't think it's coming anytime soon. I think the next step for Milchick is going to be him again, proverbially, tightening that noose essentially, and not giving these severed employees anywhere near as much leeway as he once did.
Yeah. And you could really see how heartbreaking. I like that you highlight the review being such small little infractions. How
Yeah.
heartbreaking it must be that you do your job to the best of your ability, because what we have seen is that he does a great job. Whether you like him or you don't like him, I think that he does a great job. I mean, the chat was
hmm
talking about his dance moves, right? He tries to do his
Yeah.
job in a way where he also engages with the innies, he dances with them. We don't see Cobell doing that. I could never
Yeah.
see her, doing the dance experience and participating. But we see him engaging in that way. And to, after all of that work, have them make such a big deal out of paper clips and about
hmm
having good vocabulary. That's a slap in the face. So while he's growing up right now and he's saying, put your feelings away, when you are somebody who does feel, somebody who does have emotions, because otherwise he wouldn't have instituted the kindness reforms. It's going to get
Yep.
to the point where you're not going to be able to hold those feelings back. So I completely agree with you. It might not be on this next episode or maybe even the next one, but perhaps in the finale we see him, turn the ship around and help the Ennies instead of helping the company.
Yeah. I want to see him eventually get there. I do. I do want to see Milchick have a pretty decent redemption arc where he finally does kind of wake up, where he does realize that I have been loyal to the wrong team this whole time. Again, I think it will eventually happen, but I don't know if it's even going to happen until maybe next season. I'm kind of expecting that to be
Mm.
hopefully his season 3 arc, where he does have a redemption arc in season 3, where he does finally realize. And it would be kind of nice to set it up that way, as you mentioned, where we get to the finale of season 2, and in the very last episode of this season, he finally realizes
Mm.
just how wrong of a path he was on, and then that could set up his season 3 arc for a redemption. But I don't know. I mean, is it even possible? Is a redemption arc even possible for Milchick? And is that something that he'll ever even want? I mean, just as a fan, I would like to see that happen, but who knows where his story is ultimately going to take him? For all we know, he could just double
Mm.
down and double down and double and triple, quadruple down on trying to become the best Lumen boss possible. Possibly, the one that doesn't get a negative performance review. Maybe that is where his
Yeah.
storyline goes. I hope it doesn't. But yeah, it's hard to know where Milchick is going to go. He is one of those characters that is incredibly difficult to read, except
Mm.
for this episode. I feel like this was the first episode where it was just so easy to read him, and it was so easy to tell what he was thinking because he was so visibly distraught by this review.
He was so hurt. He was so hurt. And that's an excellent question for the chat that knows all, Jeremy's chat. Based on what you saw in this episode, guys, and how affected Milkshake was, and the whole grow, grow, grow that he tells himself, do you think that he's going to become the best Lumen boss, or is he going to rebel against them?
Good point. Very good point. Very good question indeed. Yeah, chat. Let us know. Sound off. Will Milkshake ultimately just double down and become that super strict corporate boss? Or will he eventually get to the point where he realizes he's been playing for the wrong team? Yeah, what do you guys think? Rebel Milchick or company Milchick? That is the question. I guess I could create a poll and people could vote on whether or not they think it's going to be rebel milkshake, or is it going to be corporate milkshake? That is what I will do. I will put up a poll. You guys can vote on it. We'll see where this vote goes throughout the night. Does Milkshake ultimately have some kind of redemption arc on the horizon, or is it company corporate Milkshake for him?
I like that. Rebel milkshake. I would like mini milkshake and big milkshake to rebel. That would be super cute.
Mini milkshake to join him, yeah. That would be nice.
They work
It
well
does
as
seem
a
like
team.
they do. I mean, I like the dynamic that they have in a lot of their scenes. Especially, I know you and I talked about the theremin and her getting so excited to play it, and he kind of pulls her away. Oh, you can play your piece for me later. Very kind of father daughter esque. Yeah, it's that's a good one. But yeah, here you go, guys. This is the poll: Rebel Milkshake, yes or no? Will Milkshake ultimately become a rebel, or no? Will he stay the corporate employee that he is? Rebel Milkshake, yes or no? Let us know what you guys think. Is a redemption arc coming for Milkshake, or is it the company man for him for the duration? Yeah. What about you? When you look at Milkshake and everything that we've seen, I do feel like I do feel like that seed of doubt has already been planted in his mind between the painting, the review now. Like that seed of doubt is there. Whether or not it sprouts or not into something more remains to be seen. But what about you personally? Do you think Milkshake will have a redemption arc? Will he become that rebel? Or do you think he will continue to double down and be the corporate employee?
I'm just gonna go with my feelings. I want him to. I want him to rebel because I like him. I find
Mhm.
him very likable. I know that some people don't like him, but from what I have seen, all he has done is he's just tried to do his job in the kindest way possible. He could be Cobell,
Mhm.
but he's not. So he's just trying to do his job. I don't see anything super, drastic like Cobell. What she was doing was super drastic, inappropriate, right? The way that she was kind of stalking Mark. He has a bad job. I will not deny that. But he tries to do it to the best of his ability, and I want him to rebel. Him and Minnie Milkshake. Do it, Seth. Yes. Do it, Seth.
Do it, Seth.
How about
And
you?
that was one thing I've been meaning to clip. I've been meaning to clip the "Do It, Seth" and upload it to our StreamYard. We can play that during streams starting next week, because it's such
Yeah.
a great line. Yeah, it's again the fan in me definitely wants to see him have that redemption arc. The fan in me does want to see him turn against this company that has treated him not the best, to say the least. And I feel like this is the
Mhm.
kind of gist of a company like Lumen, not truly valuing their employees, not really seeing them as humans, as people, but just as numbers on a spreadsheet. So I do ultimately would love to see him kind of buck the system and finally stand up to Lumen and maybe even help the innies. Maybe that could be his ultimate redemption arc, going from controlling the innies to ultimately helping them get the freedom from their jailer to their savior, in a sense.
I like that. From their jailer to their savior. I like
Yeah,
that. Love that.
it would be cool. It would be cool to see from jailer to savior. What will Milchick do? And right now, as I take a look at the poll, it seems we have Rebel Milkshake, yes or no? We have 68% are saying yes, it will be Rebel Milkshake. Okay, so the majority of the chat, 68% of the chat, is thinking he will have some kind of redemption arc, while 32% say no. Yeah, that should be interesting to see how it shakes up. Again, I'm not expecting a redemption arc this season, but maybe in season 3, or maybe towards the very end of the show, he'll finally realize that he's been on the wrong team. But yeah, I don't think it's going to come anytime soon, but I do think it will come eventually, for sure. For sure. Let's see what else we got. Yeah, Milkshake is a classic example of someone who is not evil. His job is evil. That's actually a pretty interesting description, Matt. Yeah, and I agree with you. Yeah, I do agree with you there, where he's not evil at heart. He does have morals. He does have kindness at heart. We saw him trying to implement literally kindness reforms for the severed employees. You don't do that if you don't care about your employees. You do that because you genuinely do have morals and you have a moral compass. So I agree with you there, Matt. I think that's a pretty good way to put it. That Milkshake, he is that classic example that he's not evil. The job is evil. And I guess now the only thing is, will he let this job turn him evil or will he resist? Because that's usually how something like this would go, where just a genuine good person gets into a very evil job, and it is going to affect you at some point for the better or for the worse. So I guess that's going to be interesting to see where Milchick goes. Even though he's not evil, his job is evil, but will that evil job that he's forced to do day in and day out ever get to him to the point where it does start turning him evil, or will he resist that, I guess?
That's a great question. And I tend to see him that way, Matt. I see him as, I don't think he's generally evil. I think his job is bad. But then again, it brings up the question of morality. If your job is bad, you have to take some responsibility over the fact that you know that what you're doing is wrong. So you are not completely blameless, right? It is a job after all. From what we know, I mean, this is a cult, a corporate cult. From what we know, you could quit. He's not severed, so he doesn't have that experience. He owns a little bit of responsibility over the job that he has chosen to do.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point. It is a job at the end of the day. This isn't something that he's being forced to do by any means. He's not. It's not like he's a severed innie that is forced to do this job day in and day out. Where severed innies might not have a choice. They're created and born to serve one specific function, and that's work. But that's not Milkshake. Milkshake does have his own agency. He has his own freedom. He can walk away from this company anytime he wants. So while the job is a bit evil, like you said, he is making that conscious choice to return to it every day. So he's not 100% blameless. I do agree with you there. That's a very good point. Very good point. I don't think Mini Milkshake will rebel, though. Comes down to if they see the humanity in innies. If they don't, there's nothing to rebel against. Interesting.
And I do see the ladies in the chat love Mr. Milkshake. They're commenting on how handsome he is and his dance moves, right? So, I mean, I could see it, right? Sometimes when you have an actor that just happens to be quite attractive, even though they're supposed to be the bad guy, right? It just kind of wins over the ladies' hearts, and it kind of seems like Jeremy's chat loves Mr. Milkshake and his moves.
It is one of those things where, yes, even when an actor or an actress is cast in a little bit more of a villainous role, sometimes they just have that sort of charm, that sort of flamboyance, that sort of just attractive nature that just makes you want to like them sometimes, even though they might not be the noblest of characters, even though they might be a little bit more on the villainous side. Sometimes that charm just comes through and you can't help but like this person a little bit. And sometimes it's also just pure acting performance as well. I think that factors into it as well, where Trammell Tillman is so good in this role. He's so good at playing Milchick. You can't help but kind of like him every once in a while, even though he has done some questionable things for sure. But yeah, Milkshake is a true believer. I do think he's a true believer right now. I don't think he always will be, but I do think he is right now, unfortunately. And I think that's why the performance review, shook him so much and why it affected him so much, because he is kind of that true believer. He does kind of believe in Lumon, and I think he does genuinely want to be the best boss he can be. So when he sees that negative performance review, yeah, it's going to get to him a little bit because ultimately I do think he does believe in Lumen. I think he will eventually wake up, but as of right now, yeah, he's a believer. He is a believer. Yeah, it's going to be interesting. Going to be interesting to see which way Milkshake goes. But let's talk a little bit about Burt, Irving, and Fields. Now, this was, of course, probably one of the higher anticipated scenes of this episode. We saw in episode 5, they brilliantly set up the what was meant to be probably the most awkward ham dinner in existence. But then it comes around and it's a little awkward at the beginning, but it's nowhere near as awkward as it could have been. But it does start to take some dark turns. And it does start to take some turns in the sense where you start to question characters' motivations and who characters really are. And I think Burt is number one on that list in terms of going into this dinner thinking one thing about Burt and then coming out of this dinner thinking something totally different, seeing Burt in a totally different new light than we saw him before this dinner. But first off and foremost, we finally meet Fields, and they did recast the actor in season 1. There was a different actor playing Fields, just in that quick little glimpse we see at the end of season 1. But in season 2, they went out and got the brilliant John Noble to play Fields. And anyone who's seen Fringe, you know exactly what I talk about, what I'm talking about when I say just how brilliant of an actor John Noble is. Like, he's good in everything he's in, but John Noble really, really shined in the TV series of Fringe as he played the scientist named Walter, and he was just so good in that role. I was super excited to see that John Noble had joined the cast of Severance. And seeing as they did cast a more prominent actor to play Fields, I'm hoping we're going to get some more Fields. I'm hoping that they didn't cast someone like John Noble only to play this character once in one single episode. So I hope we see some more Fields in the future. But what was your first impression of Fields, PM, when you first met him?
I love him. I love him. I gotta say, I love Burt and Irving together. They were my favorite story. And before I met Fields, I was like, you know what? Some people have to get hurt. It is what it is, right? But then we meet Fields, and he's so nice. He's so warm. And actually, what I noticed about Fields and Irving is that Burt has a type. Burt's type is a sophisticated man who is cultured, right? And so they both are kind of the same. He even mentions to Irving, for the life of me, I don't know what your any son, this Philistine, right? They're culture sophisticated. They're the same sort of a type. So Burt has a type. And Fields was so sweet and so warm, and he was just trying his best, right? So to me, I love him, and I don't want them to hurt him. I like Fields. How about you? How do you feel about Fields?
I like him. Yeah, I like him. I think he won me over in this episode where and maybe it's just my bias because I have to acknowledge I am a huge, huge John Noble fan. I love him in everything he's in. So maybe there's a little bias there, which I'm totally okay with acknowledging. But no, I liked him. I liked him. I liked his personality. He had a pretty good personality. I liked his view on severed individuals. He had a very interesting take on how he views severed people, that he does believe that even innies deserve a chance to have love and deserve a chance to, that they have a soul in all of this. He does genuinely seem to have compassion for a severed individual and for the innies and for the life that they live. And I was impressed by that, especially considering the position he's in, where his own husband's innie carried on an affair with Irving's innie. You could totally understand if Fields was just incredibly kind of mad, just incredibly cold and not very welcoming to Irving. I could have totally understood that if he was. but he isn't. As soon as Irving steps through the door, he's super kind, he's super warm towards him. The first thing he says is a joke. I can't believe your innie was attracted to this Philistine or something. It's like he right off the bat, he's breaking the ice. He's making it known that it's okay. He's okay. He's not going to kind of bite Irving's head off. And then again, later on in the dinner, when he's expressing his own views on severed individuals and how he does believe innies deserve love, it was a very surprising take to hear from someone that was in his position, knowing that his husband's innie did essentially have an affair with Irving's innie, which again, he easily could have been so upset, and I don't think anybody would have blamed him, but he handled it with grace.
Oh my God, that's perfectly put, Jeremy. He handled being confronted by this and a ham dinner with grace. And it's like, before I saw the ham dinner, I just thought to myself, how is a ham dinner going to go down with three people who are in a very difficult situation? And it was quite lovely. I would like to attend that ham dinner. It was a good time. It wasn't awkward at all. I thought they were having fun. And like the chat mentioned, Fields drinks too much wine. And
Yes.
I kind of like that about his character, right? I love a sloppy, like I drink too much wine and then I start saying things I shouldn't say. I love that. I love that style of character or person. And maybe it's because I relate to it. But Fields, he's just, not only is he sweet, but you could see the sadness when he says that specific line that you mentioned of a warrior to innies physically, you know.
Yeah.
I forget how he phrases it, but asking them if they were intimate, and then they kind of don't want to answer, right? And I guess they wouldn't know the answer, so that's something that they couldn't answer. Then he goes on to explain, it's okay, I hope it was beautiful, I believe innies deserve love. And he takes a big gulp of that wine. So he's trying to handle this messed up situation as much with as much grace as possible, right? And I found that very endearing.
Yeah, it was. I was just super surprised, I guess, with how, calm his demeanor was, and how, again, just how accepting he was of this entire situation. I think I was expecting, I guess, a different temperament from Fields, but no, he again, he was very graceful throughout the whole thing, trying to consider all angles, all aspects of this, and trying, and looking at it as any Burt and any Irving are two different people that with two different souls. That I don't know, maybe looking at it that way and having that approach makes the infidelity part of it a little bit easier to swallow. Maybe, I don't know, maybe it's a form of self-defense to kind of protect himself, but he handled it well. He handled it a lot better than I imagine a lot of people would if you found out your significant other's innie carried on an illicit relationship that ultimately got them fired, at least according to the story that Burt is kind of going with, that this romantic entanglement ultimately got him fired from Lumon. But I'm not so sure if that's the case. I'm not so sure how much I believe Burt. And I know I'm certainly not the only one who thought of this when this episode aired the other night, that it's a very interesting coincidence that just as Burt invites Irving over to his house for this ham dinner, at the very same time we have Drummond, Mr. Frolic himself, breaking into Irving's apartment, which has led a lot of people to believe, myself included, that maybe Burt is a little bit more than meets the eye. Maybe Burt is a little bit sus. Now, if it was just this scene on its own, if it was just the happenstance where Drummond breaks into Irving's apartment right when he happens to not be there, if it's just that, I think that's easily explainable. That's easily overlooked. Not overlooked, but it's easy to explain, where maybe Lumon simply had him under surveillance. So they knew the apartment was empty now. So that's when they knew to come in. But then when you add on the fact of the other line, that was a little bit of a slip, I feel, when Fields tells Irving that Burt has been working for Lumen for 20 years. And of course, for Irving, that I imagine was an instant red flag, as the first thing he mentions is Severance has only been around for 12 years. And of course, Burt tries to play this off as though Fields just had a little too much to drink. But I think both of those instances kind of take away the coincidence for me and makes me start to think that, yes, maybe Burt did work for Lumen for 20 years. Maybe Burt isn't who he says he is. Maybe Burt is one giant trap for Irving to learn information on Irving and ultimately learn what he's planning. Because we know Irving's outie definitely seems to be planning something, gathering all this intelligence on Lumen. And maybe Burt was put in Irving's path specifically as a trap. But what about you? Did you? It is heartbreaking. But did you come away from this dinner a little bit sus towards Burt at all? And let us know in the chat as well. What did you guys think? Did you come away from this dinner a little bit sus that maybe Burt isn't telling the whole truth? What did you guys think?
Great question. Yes, chat. The oracles and Jeremy's chat. Is Burt lying? Is he lying to us and to Irving? So when I saw this, and I kind of go back to Xavier, one of our Sevi's comment about him sitting with the fireplace right in back of him, he does look devilish. He does look malicious. I don't trust him. Part of me was dissecting the scene. And when he says that the reason why he was severed was because they were at church and Fields would like him to go to heaven, but since he knows that regular him will not be going to heaven, they figured that him being severed could allow for the any Burt to go to heaven with Fields. When they talk about that, they specifically mentioned that the pastor was talking about innies and outies having a soul, and that it was relatively new. So if the first severed floor was 12 years ago, then that would mean that he wasn't working there. He wasn't severed until he went to church, heard the sermon, and then decided to do that. So then it couldn't have been 20 years. The problem here is that Fields is kind of saying two different things. He's saying God, Jesus, led him to be severed. And the sermon talked about innies and outies. Therefore, severance was already happening. So maybe he did drink too much wine.
That's a good point, actually. Yeah, he kind of contradicts himself in a sense with both of these statements. Yeah. Could it potentially be that maybe he did just have a little bit too much wine? Which statement was ultimately the truth? Which statement was ultimately false? So that's a very good point when you have a character that is kind of saying something that directly contradicts something he said 10 minutes before that. So that's a very good pickup on your part. And it makes me kind of think, what is going on here? What is the truth ultimately? Is Burt sus? Is Burt really this kind of 20-year Lumen vet that is setting Irving up? Or is he not, maybe? Is that not what's happening here? Is it just coincidence that Drummond is breaking in because Lumen maybe had him under surveillance? Yeah, that's interesting.
And when we look at what happened during the ham dinner, and you and I kind of, we discussed this about Burt. When we look at what we know and what we see on screen that he actually does, the facts stand that even in this ham dinner, as lovely as it went, because this ham dinner was lovely, he says something like, oh, I want you to meet my Fields, right? And come over to my house and bring wine. And then at the very end, he says, well, when Irving says we should do this again, the three of us with Fields, he says, or the two of us. So that in itself, we're seeing that he's a liar, a manipulator, and a flirt. We've always known that he was flirty. But even at the ham dinner, it's like, you can't stop yourself from lying, can you? Or from cheating.
Yeah. Yeah, he is a flirt. You're like you said, the innie and the outie. They're both very much very flirty with Irving. Irving, of course, is definitely reciprocating a little bit when they're both saying goodbye to each other in the hall. Yeah, there is a little bit of that Irving and Burt do kind of have that chemistry. They do kind of have that natural attraction to each other. We saw how their innies were. So what's to say the outies aren't going to have a similar, just natural connection and attraction to one another? But yeah, what's going on here? We see clearly flirt with Burr already entertaining the idea of having some kind of date with Irving without Fields, which of course does make you feel a little bit bad for Fields because they did just introduce such a really cool character with him. You feel a little bad for Fields after seeing this.
You do. And also, not to mention that the whole point, Fields was really hoping that the Innie version of Bert would go to heaven with him, be in love, be together. And now he doesn't even have that. So what Fields
True.
was aiming for, he doesn't even have because that Innie version of Bert is in love with Irving too. So that in itself, like Fields has lost a lot. And I did kind of feel bad for that. But I do notice that the chat is saying maybe he has Fields' permission, kind of an open relationship. And it could be.
Uh-huh.
It definitely
Okay.
could be.
Interesting. Interesting. It's certainly a possibility. I mean, we do know that Fields does have a view towards innies as though they are their own person. They are a separate individual, and how he does believe that each innie deserves a chance at a life and love. So he does have favorable views towards severed individuals and towards innies already. So no, I think that's an interesting possibility that there's a little bit of an openness there between what is happening between them. But yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm still a little sus of Burt from everything that's going on with him and the timing of him planning this dinner, the timing of Drummond breaking into Irving's apartment. It all just seems too coincidental to be a coincidence.
Mm-hmm.
But it could be. It could very well be, or not a coincidence, or it could very well be Lumen was, again, simply just surveilling Irving's house. So they knew when to break in because they knew he wasn't there because they watched him leave, kind of thing. Um, and I don't know. I think I liked the symmetry and the kind of the poeticness of the Shakespeareanness of how we look at Burt and Irving's innies, how both of their innies were just naturally drawn to each other. They just naturally fell in love with one another. Wouldn't it? I just thought it would be so interesting and ironic how if you have that happening with the innies, and then all of a sudden you have the outies becoming enemies, essentially, where it's on one hand the innies are falling in love with each other, and on the other hand, the outies are forced to ultimately destroy one another if they are working on separate sides. Because I always thought it was interesting that Irving might potentially already be working for some kind of rebellion. And I think we got the name of that rebellion in this episode, the Open Mind. The Open Mind. The
Is it
Whole
the
Mind.
whole mind?
Excuse me.
The whole
The
mind?
Whole Mind. Yeah, we hear Burt mention something called Whole Mind, which of course seems to be some kind of activist or anti-Lumen group, anti-Severance group. They're very much against Severance. So part of me was wondering if Irving himself is already working with Whole Mind. Maybe he's already a part of Whole Mind's plan, and maybe that's why he's doing all of this research. Maybe Irving and Whole Mind are researching Lumen in order to ultimately strike some sort of blow against the company. And maybe they gained word of that through these telephone calls that Irving was having in the phone booth. I mean, these phone booths are essentially located inside the town of Kier. Maybe they are listening in on these phone calls. And they found out that Irving is essentially working with some kind of network of people that are working against Lumen, which could be the Whole Mind people. And maybe they specifically put Burt in Irving's path to combat that, to gather intelligence on Irving and on Whole Mind. So I guess I always just like the symmetry and the kind of poeticness of you have the innies falling in love with each other, and now the outies are going to be forced to destroy one another. I guess I just like the yin and yang of that.
A Shakespearean tragedy indeed. Just
Indeed.
so heartbreaking because they were so beautiful, so innocent together. And to find out that the reason why Bert reached over to grab Irving's little hand was because he was being malicious and manipulative and it was all a lie, that would just be so heartbreaking.
It
I
would
like
be.
it. And
It would be.
like you tend to be right, so I'm gonna go with that. But I think yeah, they might be setting us up for heartbreak in
Hope
the
not.
worst way.
It is
And
in the worst way.
I still see people in the chat talking about Radar and where is Radar, right?
Where's
um
Radar? Yeah.
that is a great question because you would think that he would attack Mr. Frolic or something. I don't have
Yeah.
any pets, but maybe the people in the chat, if you have a pet, a dog, do you like put them at a pet sitter while you go on
Not
the date,
usually.
or
Not
what do
usually.
you do
I
when you go on your dates, Jeremy?
well, I haven't been on a date in a very long time. But no, I mean I've been a dog owner my whole life and I can't once remember me having a dog sitter for my dog, other than maybe going on vacation and going to be away from the house for a week. You leave the dog with a friend or something in that regard. But other than that, yeah, I mean, Radar should be right there in Irving's apartment. And even if he's not the attack dog type, if somebody enters the apartment at night that's not Irving, at the very least, every dog would at least bark. At least bark. And we didn't hear a single peep. So that is a good question, chat. Yeah, what happened to Radar? Where is Radar, essentially? Good point. I don't know. Drummond better not have done anything to him, though, I'll tell you that. Frolic is going to be on my never-ending shit list if he messed with Radar.
Oh my God. Could you imagine if next episode Irving comes home to Radar not being hurt
Oh
because
my
Frolic
God.
did something to him?
Oh my God. At that point, I would hope and pray that Severance turns into John Wick and we see Irving just go on a tear to get revenge for his dog, Radar. That is what I would like to see if that was the case. We can see Irving Wick, essentially. I hope that's not the case. I hope that is not the case. But no, it's a valid question though, chat. Yeah, where exactly was Radar in this scene? How come he was not there when Drummond entered the apartment? Because again, most dog owners don't leave their dog with a sitter if they're just going to dinner for the night. Yeah, I don't know. Interesting point. Interesting point, guys. I don't know, but I am a little bit worried about Irving. I am a little bit sus of Burt. I do think Burt, I don't know, something just that 20-year Lumen comment kind of stuck with me, I guess. But then again, you also bring up a really good point that it does kind of directly contradict something he said earlier in the night. So is the wine a factor here? I don't know, but something gives me a bad vibe from Burt now. And I think his look at the end of the episode also kind of gave me a little bit of a bad vibe as well. We have this kind of them flirting with each other as they're saying goodbye. But then as he does leave and he does start walking back to his car, we see Burt with a very, I don't know, maybe it was just me, but he's got a very weird look on his face when he goes and shuts this door. I don't know. I mean, I'm starting to not fully trust Burt, and I'm starting to think that maybe he is a little bit sus.
Hmm.
I don't
Yes,
know.
so I like this picture that you have on screen because I did notice that he has a smile and he drops it.
Super
And
quick, right?
he's
Yeah.
exactly, and as if it was all faked. He's putting on an act. And now that the act and the performance is done, he just drops it. And he almost looks at him with disdain. So it does make me think that you are correct in your theory that potentially they are enemies. They're working for two opposite sides. Irving is with the Whole Mind Collective, and Burt is with Lumen. Um,
Yeah.
but what does the chat think, you guys? Do you guys think that Burt is lying? Is he lying to us?
Yeah. I mean, what do you guys think? What does the chat think? Is Burt sus or not? Is Burt just the Burt that we have come to know and love? Or is there a darker side to Burt? Is Burt actually setting Irving up? Is Burt trying to gain his own intelligence on Irving? And like you said, maybe find out a little bit more about this whole mind collective and if Irving is really working for them. Is Burt trying to gather his own intelligence? And I guess that could cause for another poll. I will put up another poll and we will ask the chat, is Burt sus? Simple yes, simple no. Is Burt sus? But as terms of Rebel Milkshake, as I end the poll, it looks like 75% of the chat, 75%, 3/4 of the chat believe that we will see Rebel Milkshake at some point. There we go.
Yes.
I am with you 75%. I do think we are going to get there eventually.
Yes, I'm very excited. And like I said, the chat, Jeremy's chat tends to be right on all of these things. So I'm really
They
excited
are.
because I love him. So 75%, that's really good. I'll take that.
I'll take that. I mean, 3/4 of the chat, 75%. That's good odds right there. It's a lot better than 25% for sure. So I'll take that too. I'm with you there. I am with you there. But up next we have, is Burt sus, ladies and gents. Let us know right now. The poll is going up. All you have to do is refresh your live chat and you should see the new poll. Is Burt sus? Yes or no? I think he is a little sus. I think he's a little sus. This dinner definitely made me look at Burt in a totally different light. And now I keep kind of going back in my head and trying to replay Burt scenes to wonder if there were other red flags that maybe we could have picked up, that we could pick up on in hindsight. So that's kind of been my mission now. I'm going back and looking at some other Burt scenes to hopefully see if there were any other early signs that Burt might not have been wholly honest from the beginning.
Oh my
I don't
God.
know.
If the tote bag was a lie, it's going to break my heart because that's one of my favorite interactions. If the whole him going over to give him the tote bag was a lie, that's just going to destroy me.
That's going to be
Can
bad.
you imagine if it has all been a setup? Maybe he's not even severed. He like knew exactly what he
Yes.
was doing the entire time. That's why we actually
Yes.
talked about this, you and I, how
Yep.
we noticed that it was Burt who was always kind of making the move on Irving.
Yep.
Irving was a little bit more reserved, but Burt
Yep.
touched them first, took him to the room with the greenery, kind of gave him the gift of the tote bag that I love.
Yep.
So he kind of has been the one that was going after him, right?
He was. You're right. It kind of always was Burt that was the initiator. He always initiated the contact himself, where Irving was a little bit more shy, a little bit scared. The first time they do start to kind of have physical contact, what happens? We see Irving get scared and he leaves. He literally runs away. But it's always Burt that seems to be initiating that physical contact. Burt's the one that's always taking it to that next more personal step. So it's like, was he ever even severed, I guess? And that was another interesting point that Xavier brought up in his recent comment. Xavier left a really awesome long comment and nice theory on one of our recent streams. And I believe that was part of his theory as well, that maybe Burt was never even severed. And that's an interesting idea. That's a very, very interesting idea. And I'm going to pull that up. I'm going to pull that comment up and we can take a look at it and discuss it a little bit further. And let's see what you guys think in the chat. Let's see what you guys think.
And this is a great example, you guys, Jeremy Sevis, of the commitment that Jeremy really has to you guys. If you have a comment and you comment on one of his videos, like he reads everything and he pays attention. It's all about you guys. So I think that this is a great example of how what you say matters. It totally matters here, which is why I love this channel.
It does. Well, thank you for that. I very much appreciate that. That does mean a lot. And yeah, it does. I mean, that's what these discussions are for ultimately. I mean, like I said, you and I, we could get on here and talk about Severance for hours and never get bored. But what's the point of doing a live stream if you're doing that? The point of doing a live stream is to interact with everybody in the chat. We want to know what you guys think. What were your thoughts? What were your predictions? What were your favorite scenes? What were your least favorite scenes? It's there's no point of doing a live stream if you're not going to interact with the community. And that's something we always love doing here on this channel. Now, let me stop sharing this. Let me pull this up, and we will take a look at Xavier's recent comment, and we will go through it. We shall go through it and discuss it a little bit. And again, this was a good one. This was a really, really good one. And this is why I really enjoy the chat, because you guys always do come up with some really, really good thoughts and theories on this show. Yeah, always good stuff.
Oracles. There's oracles in Jeremy's chat. You guys knew that Helly was not Helly, it was Helena right
super
away.
Early on. Yeah.
Super early. Yeah.
Picked it up super early on. And it's just another example of the chat always being on it. You guys have been killing it. All right, let's see what we got here. Xavier says, I noticed something after watching the episode last night and wanted your thoughts on it. Bear with me because I'm going to jump around a bit. When Irving was at Burt's house, a few things were revealed, like the picture hanging with the mask. Burt sitting in front of the fireplace like he was already in hell. Now, that was one of the first things that I saw Xavier put in that I actually really did enjoy, and I actually 100% agreed with. I do. I love that. And that's usually the kind of thing that I would pick up on. So I'm so glad Xavier saw this and pointed this out, because it does. It has a direct correlation to some of the lines we heard earlier in the episode, where Burt does believe that he is going to hell. He does believe that he is ultimately damned. And I like how the cinematography on this show always reflects, or not always, but sometimes does reflect what the dialogue is at any given moment. And yes, just as we hear Burt talk about himself being damned and himself essentially going to hell, we have this imagery of Burt already in hell, already surrounded by fire. So that was a really good pickup on Xavier's part. Really enjoyed that.
Oh yeah. I went back and I watched the scene again, and the entire time as he's talking about Jesus, Jesus brought me to Severance. The fire is going, and it really is illustrating the fact that this man is so secure in who he is and what he's done that he knows. He's not even playing around. He's not even entertaining the idea that he could change. He's like, oh no, for sure, I'm going to hell, which is quite refreshing as he knows who he is. But I love the setup, love the ham dinner, and the fireplace with the little fire there right behind him. Is like, okay, he's a bad guy, right? Like, he's a bad guy.
It does kind of go a little bit more with that theme, doesn't it? Like you see, like you said, this shot, fire in the background. He's talking about himself going to hell at some point, where we already see the imagery of him basically already in hell, already surrounded by said fire. Yeah, it does give off a little bit of that villain vibe, doesn't it? It does. I agree with you. I do agree with you. Man, good stuff. Good stuff. And next he says, and Fields saying Burt worked for Lumon for 20 years before Burt corrected him and said 12. Firstly, I believe Burt purposely lured Irving to his home so Mr. Drummond could access Irving's home. And that's exactly what I thought too. You and I are 100% synced brainwaves on that. Because that was the first thing I thought too. Like, as soon as we were watching this episode, that was my first thought. Like, holy cow, Burt really set Irving up so Drummond could search his place. Like, that was my first instinct. Again, that scene on its own in isolation could probably be explained as easy as, again, Lumon surveilling his house. But then when you add the 20-year comment to it, two instances do start to seem a little bit more like it's on purpose and not a coincidence, I guess. So I'm right there with you. Firstly, I believe Burt purposely lured him into his home so Drummond could get access to Irving's home, and we did. We see Drummond doing exactly that, looking at all of the intel and all of the research that Irving has been doing on the Severed program and on Lumen. I think Burt is a loyal employee of Lumen and was probably a fixer slash cleaner of problems like Mr. Drummond is now. And I don't think Burt is severed at all. And I like that. That was an interesting idea in terms of him not being severed, that maybe this whole thing has been one giant act. That Burt has been setting this trap ever since the beginning, and he's not really a severed employee. I think that's an interesting theory. It's hard to know one way or the other if Burt is really severed or not. I mean, it certainly portrayed him as he was a severed employee. They even gave him his own retirement party. But then again, yeah, could that all have been one giant ruse just to get closer to Irving? So it's an interesting theory and a very valid question to ask, at least. For sure.
I'm 50%. 50% there, meeting you guys on that theory, because he does mention that it was the sermon at church and Jesus who brought him to Severance, and that was already happening. The program was already happening. The taglines of Innie and Outie were already happening. So when you start a program, it's going to take a little while for you to have this tagline that the public knows. But the public already knew Innie, Outie. Not only did they know about it, but they already had a stance on souls, on Innies having separate souls from their Outie counterparts. Therefore, it kind of makes me think he feels the same two things that are not matching. What do we believe, right? And he's also drinking a lot of wine. So I'm like 50% there.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, it does make you think. I would say I'm probably not 100% either myself with it as well. I like the idea of Burt potentially not being severed and that this was just one giant long con. But then again, there are some other aspects that point to him being legitimately severed. And I think you just brought up a really good one in terms of him having the church being the thing that led him to the severed program. So yeah, that's an interesting one. And yeah, what do you guys think, chat? Is Burt really severed? Has this been one giant setup from Burt the whole time? Is he really not severed? Or do you think Burt really is severed and he's just using his Outie and his Innie for different purposes? And that his Outie maybe is a little bit sus, but that doesn't necessarily mean he's not severed, I guess. He can be sus and severed at the same time. It doesn't have to be one or the other. That is certainly true. Burt lured Irving for Drummond, yes. And again, I do kind of get that vibe that he did. I do kind of get that vibe. Burt is severed. He did seem severed. Yes, interesting. I can't buy this never severed because the trap requires knowledge of the future. And again, it would be incredible Nostradamus-like planning. So that is a good point as well, Matt. Him not being severed would have been, it's a little tougher to pull off as opposed to him being severed, yet his Outie is simply still working for Lumen, and his Innie is legitimately his Innie. So that's, I think I do probably lean a little bit more that way, that he is severed. But it is an interesting theory, though. I do like the theory. That would make Burt like player number 1 in Squid Games. Indeed. Yeah, but I'm hoping the writers won't go that far to trick us. That's a good point as well. I mean, how far are they going to go? How early are they thinking about setting these kinds of things up that do give us as the audience a subverted expectation in a sense? That's something they would have had to set up right from the very beginning. It's not like they can write his character as severed in season 1 and then come up with this idea in season 2 and say, oh, he wasn't ever severed. So I do kind of tend to lean a little bit more towards Burt is really severed, but his Outie is still working with Lumen, and this was a bit of a setup for Irving. That's kind of where I lean, but that's just me. Yeah.
I like that because it makes me think of Felicia having a conversation with Irving, saying that Burt was never afraid of anything and his whole time working there, except he was afraid of seeing Irving and he took like hours on his hair. So to me, that says that he is severed and he was in love. And that's what I want to believe. Because
Yeah.
otherwise, why would he be so nervous about seeing Irving, right? And like doing his hair.
Yeah. Yeah, good point. Very good point. He was super nervous. He's doing his hair, the little bit of hair that he does have. When, like you said, she specifically stated how fearless he is, and Beard Egan himself could come down onto this floor. No one's going to tell me how to 3D print a mug or whatever he was doing. Um, yeah, no, that's a good point. That is a good point. I do tend to think the severance is real. I do think Burt is really severed. I do think he has an innie. I do think he has an outie. But I also do think his outie is sus. I do think his outie is potentially still working for Lumen. And yes, this dinner was a trap, not a trap, but this dinner was a setup in a sense to get Irving out of the house so Drummond could search the house. I do think that is probably what's going on here. Because if they're surveilling his house, they can always know when he's leaving, but they never know when he's going to go back. So if Lumen really wanted to get inside Irving's house and really search it, they're going to need an instance where they're going to know Irving's going to be outside of the house for a while. I mean, yes, I suppose you could do it during the day, during work hours, but that's during broad daylight with a much bigger chance of witnesses seeing you. A lot better to do this kind of thing at night. And how do you guarantee to get Irving out of his house at night for an extended period of time? You have Burt invite him to a dinner, a ham dinner, an awkward ham dinner.
A ham
But
dinner,
yeah,
and it didn't make sense to us, right? We were
yeah,
questioning why not just coffee if what you're trying to do is appease Fields because of this thing that happened. Why not just coffee? Why a sit down ham dinner, right? That takes a lot more time. And bring wine. That's like, okay, we're gonna drink, we're gonna eat, it's gonna take a little while. um
hmm yeah,
but also, Jeremy, now that we have this on screen, we got Attila. This is the scene where they use the
yes,
title of the episode, which I love that Severance does that. They will use
yeah.
the title of the episode. So I always wonder, like, who's going to say the line? We got Attila and the meaning of Attila.
Yes, we did. Because yeah, we were wondering what exactly is Attila going to mean? What kind of deeper meaning is Attila going to have pertaining to this episode? And yes, we got the answer of Attila. How apparently Burt and Fields used to call each other Honey and Hun. It got shortened to Hun after an extended period of time, and at some point, apparently, it switched to them just calling each other Attila the Hun, which is super. It's super strange, but it is kind of super innocent and kind of cute at the same time. I wasn't expecting that to be the connection to Attila. When I saw the title, I thought there was going to be some kind of deeper underlying connection, some kind of deeper underlying meaning. We know that Attila also translates to father. It means father as well. So I thought maybe it will have something to do with that. But no, this was a satisfactory answer that Attila was it's essentially Hodor. And that's something we get
Yeah.
something similar in Game of Thrones, where Hodor eventually starts off as saying, hold the door, hold the door, hold the door. And
Mhm.
after an extended period of time, it gets more and more abbreviated to the point where hold the door becomes Hodor. And this kind of gave me a
Hodor.
similar vibe where it started off as Hun, 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 and it kind of got switched to Attila, them calling each other Attila at some point. So it reminded me of Hodor, I guess.
I like that. When I heard about like Attila and how it started as Han, but then years later it became Attila. It made me think about certain relationships. Not all, of course, there's
Mm-hmm.
fairy tales, but certain relationships where as you get started, right? It's Han, honey, and then your honey will get to the point where your honey will become your Attila. And it made me think of the relationship with Burt and Irving.
Mm-hmm.
When we met them, their innies, it was honey. They were honey to each other. And now that they might be on opposite sides, they might be each other's Attila. They might go from the
Ah,
honey of their life to the absolute destruction of their life.
very true. Very true. And that would kind of mirror the theme that's been set up on the show from the beginning, where the innies and the outies usually tend to have much different personalities, different personas, different wants and needs. They're kind of different people, usually, the innies from the outies. And that could be another very interesting example of that, where, they, again, the innies start off as lovers and the outies eventually end up there. That's very interesting, very poetic and tragic at the same time.
Mhm.
Interesting. Interesting. But yes, Attila, we got the definition. We got the real reason why Attila was the title of the episode. And it did not disappoint at the very least. This was a very satisfying episode, I thought. Really, really
It
did enjoy
was.
it. Yeah,
I enjoyed
really
the
good.
ham dinner. Again, it was a
I did.
wonderful ham dinner. And now it gave us new tagline, Sevis. So to your loved one on your next romantic night, call them Attila.
Call him
See how it
Attila.
goes.
There you go.
See how it goes. Report back.
Uh, Throw Han away and start using Attila. It worked for Burt and Fields. Maybe it'll work for you as well. Maybe. Interesting. Now, of course, we would be remiss if we didn't talk a little bit about Dylan and his Audi's wife. Now, I feel
Mhm.
like this is something we've seen build. They've been building towards this ever since they first introduced the idea of Irving spending time with his Audi's family. And I think a lot of us had a feeling they would get to a point where they would start developing feelings for each other and act on those feelings. And we got that in this episode. And it even started to get a little bit kind of darker towards the end when she does eventually get back home and her husband, Audi Dylan, excuse me, asks her, "What was it like seeing me at work today?" And she lies. She lies and
Mhm.
tells her husband, "I didn't see you. You must have been busy. They wouldn't let me see you." Which, of course, very telltale sign that they are very much developing feelings for one another. And it seems like the more time they spend together, the more Dylan's wife is starting to see any Dylan as the kind of perfect idealized version of what she wishes her husband was on the outside. And
Mhm.
while I do enjoy Dylan getting this connection and Dylan having this time and developing this connection with his Audi's wife and kind of falling in love, you did almost kind of feel bad for Dylan a little bit in some of the scenes as well. And I know you and I kind of talked a little bit about this in a sense, where Dylan specifically says, well, she actually starts it by saying, "We are together, aren't we?" And Dylan says,
Mm.
"No, we're not. I'm stuck down here, and you're together with him out there, while I can never leave this place." And you did kind of feel a little bit bad for Dylan,
Ouch.
knowing that that is essentially the truth. Dylan is stuck down here. He's stuck on this severed floor, and now all he has in his mind is his Audi and her together on the outside world, something that he'll never be able to have for himself. So while I love that they're developing this connection, I did feel bad for Dylan in this scene.
Yeah. Oh my God, I felt so bad. I like that you point that out because it's him reminding her we are not the same. Even
Yeah,
though earlier in the scene he provides her some comfort when she says she's honest to him, maybe in a way that she couldn't be to her Audi husband, and says, you go through a lot of phases, like making beer in the garage and woodworking and scuba.
yeah,
And I wonder if it's because you're unhappy. And he provides her some comfort by saying, I know, I'm sure it's not that because here I am happy. I just want to hear about my offsprings and stare at
yeah.
your
His
face.
offspring. And I wanted to ask you that. Do you think offspring, you think that's another word that he learned from Rickon in the You Are You book?
I think so. That is so Rickon. That is Rickon. That is
It is.
for sure You Are You book. And I love that they're using the language of the You Are You book. Definitely, that's all Rickon. But it's so sweet how he says, like, I just want to stare at your face, and he's smiling with
Mhm.
his cute little face. And you mentioned this, how she also looks different than when we first saw her and when we see her at home, right?
Yeah.
So we kind of see something different in her as well.
We do. We do. You can see where she did her hair a little bit better. She kind of got a little bit dolled up. She wanted to present herself well when she came to see Innie Dillon, and yeah, that seems to be a sign that she is also developing feelings for Innie Dillon, just as he is developing feelings for her. Because yes, she sees the life that she's living on the outside, and while I imagine she does love her husband, I imagine she also just can't help the fact that when she sees Innie Dillon, she sees the perfect version of what she wishes her husband was, where he's not this. They are two different people. Innie Dillon and Outie Dillon are two totally different individuals in terms of how they are, how they operate, and their capabilities. And yeah, I mean, yeah, you see her kind of get all prettied up to go see Dillon in this scene. And then yeah, you see her in her home life, and it's just a shaggy ponytail, just regular clothes. She doesn't go out of her way to dress up for her husband, but she did for Innie Dillon.
I have to say, chat, I love how Jeremy describes that dolled up. I'm gonna steal it
All
and I'm
dolled
gonna
up.
use it now. I'm gonna
All
use
dolled up.
dolled up. All dolled up. It's so cute.
Mm.
And she's so happy. And like the chat is saying, he asks for a hug because he starts to feel bad about the situation when he says, I'm
Yes.
not, you're with him, but
Yep.
I'm not. And you see his little face go from having this sweet smile to just dropping and being super sad. And he says, I like the hugging. Can we hug again? Right. And she's the
Yeah.
one that goes in for the kiss. He doesn't try to kiss her, quite innocent, but she's the one that kind of kisses him. So I think that
Yeah.
it's confirmed. And also, the oracles in Jeremy's chat knew this. Jeremy
Yep.
Sevis know all. You guys immediately said from the first meeting that he was going to end up having an affair with the wife. And
Yeah.
I think we could confirm that at this point, right? With the
Oh
kiss.
yeah. Oh yeah. It did seem like this is where it was heading. I wasn't sure how quick it was going to happen. I didn't think it would happen this quick, but yeah, I mean, it did seem like they were developing feelings for each other, and inevitably they end up here where they're both initiating that contact. And it is kind of cute. It is kind of innocent the way you hear Dylan. Can we not asking for a hug? The way he says it is so funny. Can we try the hug thing again? It's like, oh my God, this poor guy. Can we try the hug thing again? That felt kind of good. I'm like, this poor guy. Because, yeah, it seems like, he is the idealized version of who she married, but he is stuck down here. And he does have to have that thought in his mind every single day when he works now, that this woman that he's developing feelings for is out there living with him, and he's stuck here and he can't do anything about it. So as much as happy as I think I was for them developing this connection, yeah, you can't help but feel a little bit bad for Dylan. I mean, the poor guy just knows this is a life that is just outside of his reach, a life that he will never be able to have because he is an innie. It's unfortunate. It is unfortunate.
And I like that. I like that you, well, I like most of your ideas. However, I like that you analyze what's gonna happen next, because I feel like we get, or at least I get just kind of trapped in the emotion. I'm like, oh my God, I'm so excited. I love this. He's so cute. They're so cute. She's dolled up. But now that you mentioned that, that is true. We're also being set up for heartbreak. He's never gonna go out there. He's never gonna see his offsprings and like live his life with this woman.
Yeah.
We're kind of being set up for heartbreak, and it makes me think, is this good for him to even experience this? Because it's gonna get taken away. It's gonna get snatched away.
It is. I imagine it's going to, and especially with Milchick kind of, tightening the noose, tightening the leash, as he put it. I do get the feeling that this could be one of those things that he does away with. I mean, if Milchick was trying to, enact all of these kindness reforms, all of these new kind of perks for the innies to have after after the whole debacle of the OTC at the end of season one, and them coming back at season two, and him trying to make it seem like it's going to be a whole new severed experience, that you guys have all these new freedoms, these hall passes, there's no cameras, no microphones. It did seem like he was genuinely trying to provide a better work experience for them. But now that Milchick is on this other trajectory, now that he does seem to be tightening the noose, I think it's going to be, yeah, like I could totally see this being one of the perks that Milchick eventually ends up taking away from Dylan so he can't see his family anymore. And if that happens, I imagine that's just going to drive any Dylan that much closer to full on rebelling. So they got to be careful how they play it. You give someone like this, you give someone like any Dylan this experience, this privilege to see his outies family, in the hopes that it makes him a better worker, a more compliant worker, so he doesn't focus on anything other than his job. Yet then you go and take that thing away, that is going to create a whole new world of problems where Dylan is probably going to be in that same boat that Irving was at the end of season one. Let's burn this place to the ground kind of vibe. So it should be interesting to see how this plays out. And if this does get taken away from Dylan, how will he ultimately react, I guess? Because we saw one thing. It's interesting because we did see, and I feel like we already saw an example of this in this episode in particular. At the very beginning of the episode, we see Dylan informing Helly and Mark about the drawing that he found that Irving left. And Helly says, "Give it to me. I want to take a look at it." And Dylan says, "I don't have it with me. I left it there. I'm trying not to get in trouble right now." Like he's trying so hard to stay behaved so he doesn't lose this privilege. So it's going to be interesting to see where Dylan's loyalties are ultimately going to lie in the end. Will he end up helping his friends and going against Lumon to try and find Miss Casey? Or is he going to be way too afraid to lose this that he stays that perfect worker?
That's a great question, because he also made promises. He made promises to this woman, whether he sees her or not ever again. I imagine that he's going to have in his mind the fact that he has a family on the outside, the fact that she has kind of suffered in her marriage, as she has told him and confided in him that her husband goes through a lot of different jobs. Like he doesn't stick with one, right? And when he heard that, he realized who the Audi version of him was. He made her a promise. And this is even before the hugging, before the kissing. He promises her, "Don't worry, I'm going to make y'all proud." Because he's thinking of his children and he's thinking of her. So I imagine even if he never sees her again, he's going to have that in the back of his mind of, if I rebel, if I do something, I'm going to lose my job. So
yeah,
that's a hard one.
I'm going to lose. That's a tough one. I'm going to lose my job and essentially with it, my life and the opportunity to ever see this person ever again. All of it's going to be gone. So yeah, there's going to be a give and a take to whatever decision he makes. I imagine no matter which path he takes, he's going to gain and lose something down both roads. It's going to be tough for him. I think he's going to have a very tough journey these last few episodes in terms of where does his loyalties ultimately lie and what does he ultimately want for himself, this time with his family or to do right by his coworkers and find Miss Casey. It's going to be a tough decision for him, and I don't know which way it's going to go. I don't know which way it's going to go. Part of me believes that he'll probably do everything in his power to make sure he can keep having these visits, because this is something totally new that he's never felt before. He's experiencing love for the first time, and anyone who knows how that feels, you're never going to want that to stop. So I could totally see Dylan staying loyal to Lumon just so he doesn't lose this.
And that's going to be hard because then we're going to have to accept the other side of that. We're going to have to accept that he has to betray the innies.
Yeah.
Like he doesn't get to have everything. He either gets to have the innies and his friends and the rebellion, or his family.
Yeah, very true. It's a give and pull. It's a catch-22. It's tough. You might be gaining something you really, really want on one hand, yet to gain that thing, you're going to have to do something you don't want to do with the other. It's a tough situation to be in. And when Lumen has the power to dangle these kind of perks in front of Dylan and pull them and yank them away at any time they want, it's the ultimate power over somebody, the ultimate power to decide what somebody's going to do. And yeah,
Mhm.
Dylan's going to have a tough choice to make. Very tough choice to make for sure. Man, what a show. Again, this is why I love Severance. It really is so different from anything else that is on television right now. It's a totally different vibe of a show. Very interesting world, super interesting characters. The writing is great. The cinematography is to die for. This is such a great, unique show to dive into. And the characters just keep getting richer and richer every episode. But it's going to be interesting to see how these last 4 episodes play out. I can't believe we're entering the final 4 episodes, guys. Just 4 episodes left of season 2 of Severance. One more month of Severance. And then it is a hiatus until season 3 comes around. But man, this was a good episode. I enjoyed this episode a lot more, a little bit more than episode 5, definitely. Not that I didn't like 5, but this one was more enjoyable. I feel that more did happen. I feel that we're seeing the plot progress at a pretty steady rate each episode. I haven't really seen any episodes that you can kind of just call straight up filler. Something seems to happen in every single episode, and I love when a show does that. They don't slow down too much, and it's kind of foot on the gas the whole time, for sure.
Oh yeah,
For sure.
I have definitely noticed the new style that Dan Erickson is taking with Severance and the story writing, the way that they're handling the show, the way
Yeah,
that they give us so much information, so many answers. They don't make us wait. All the stories are there. Within one
yeah.
episode, you could rewatch it 4 or 5 times because there's so much that is in the episode, so much substance. And I appreciate that from him. I really appreciate that he doesn't make us wait to the next episode so that we could wrap up what he wants to tell us in each particular one. And like you stated, I agree. Every episode is different. It has a different style. This episode I call the romantic episode, as we got to see a lot of the romantic storylines fix themselves, right? And kind of develop. And maybe
Mhm.
the next episode it's going to be all about tragedy or whatever it may be. But it seems to have a theme. I don't think any of the episodes can be called filler. I totally agree with that. And even though this one was more like calm because it wasn't super action, it was more of an emotional episode. I
Yeah.
am so impressed by how they dragged the storyline of Helly and Any Mark out of hell. I'm
Yes.
so impressed by that. That in itself was so profound to me. The story writing, Dan Erickson is a master at storytelling. Because if you would have asked any of the innies, we were all super worried. We didn't even know, like, how do you move on? How do you move
Yeah.
on from this? And they did it
Mm.
so seamlessly, so simply that I was very impressed.
I was too. I was too. And we were a little bit worried about how the relationship between Mark and Helly would ever get repaired, essentially, especially with Mark not being honest in the beginning. He's lucky. He's lucky he fessed up and told her the truth when he did. Because if she would have found that out from somebody else, like a Dylan or a milkshake or a mini milkshake, I do think it would have completely destroyed them. Where the first thing she would have thought is, I had to learn this. I had to hear this from somebody other than you, which that would have been hard for her to recover from, and rightfully so. But yeah, I was impressed. I was surprised that they managed to salvage this relationship in a pretty sweet way, and put in a way that did seem pretty innocent. And you did kind of find yourself rooting for Mark and Helly again. At least I did in this episode. I found myself rooting for them again. Where in episode 5, I was kind of like, "Fuck, Mark's a dick. What's he doing?" Um, it was a
Oh, for
different
sure.
feel. it was a different feel. Yeah, like I was rooting for them this episode.
Oh yeah, I
Yeah.
crucified Mark. I crucified him. I was like, I don't like him. He's being so mean to her, and he was. He was. Now he's back to himself. He was not himself for a little bit. But now I'm back on the team. I'm back on the team, baby. It's Helly and any Mark, and I want them to be together. So they got me back. And I thought for sure, like I could never be like in his team again. After he said, obviously I didn't know it was you.
Yeah. Yeah, couldn't. He was, the way he played it in episode 5 was he played everything the polar opposite way that he should have. Like he played everything wrong in episode 5 in terms of his response to this. And then here we are, one episode later, he's playing everything right. He's responding in the right way at every turn. So I am glad they kind of redeemed their relationship. Mark and Helly are kind of strong. They seem to be, very strong. They're in a good place now again. And yeah, you do kind of feel like rooting for them again, whereas you didn't in episode 5. I didn't feel like rooting for Mark at all. And speaking of Mark, I see a few people bringing it up in the chat as well, which is a very, very interesting idea as well. What exactly is going to happen to Mark? We see at the end of this episode, of course, he collapses and starts convulsing. Now, earlier in the episode, we did see that Mark is starting to display similar symptoms as Petey did during his failed reintegration that ultimately led to his death. And this was something we talked about a little bit in the pregame show before the episode aired, where a lot of people were worried about Mark because he's had this cough these last few episodes. And the cough didn't worry me too much. I told myself, and I said, I'll start worrying a little bit more about Mark once he starts having nosebleeds. And then boom, an episode later, he starts having freaking nosebleeds. Now I'm worried. Now I'm a little bit worried. Because we see in this episode, Ragavi comes up to Mark and tells him there is another procedure that we can do that will speed along the reintegration process, that will make this happen a little bit faster, which she refers to as flooding the chip itself. And at first, Mark is hesitant and he doesn't want to do it. But then later on in the episode, after Mark has a not so chance encounter with Helena Eagan herself at the restaurant that he just happens to be eating at, which is another can of worms in and of itself. And I guess the first thing I'll ask before we unravel this even further and dive into this, what do you guys think, chat? And what do you think as well, PM? What is up with Helena stalking Audi Mark now? Is it as simple that Helena really does have feelings for Mark? And now that she blew her cover with the innie, she's trying her luck with the Audi? Or does Helena have a deeper plan here? Is there a bigger grand scheme that Helena is trying to enact by introducing herself to Mark in this manner? Is it just a simple attraction? Or is there a bigger plan there? What do you guys think? Does Helena really like Mark? Or is she up to something nefarious? What about you, PM? Does she like him, or is there something more going on here?
I think that she was trying to figure out what he knew because she on purpose says, "Oh, I'm sorry about the other night." He then mentions, "Oh, the overtime contingency." And she goes, "Yeah." Like, was he gonna mention the tent? Was he gonna mention her almost getting drowned by Irving? So she was waiting and kind of testing him to see what does he know and who is he? Is he the any version of himself or is he the Audi version of himself? I also think that there is a level of her being obsessed with Mark because she did seem to be, I mean, you don't need to sleep with someone for the company. I doubt that her father said, "Hey, this is what you need to do," right? And she kind of went the extra mile there. So maybe it's both. It's utilizing Mark and getting to know what he knows, but also she just happens to like him. She could get any of the other employees to do this, but because she likes Mark, is like, I'll go and do it. I'll go talk to him. I'll stalk him. And the music in this scene was very fitting because it was a tango and it felt like a tango. It felt like both of them were kind of like it was like flirty, right? And then
Yeah.
it took a turn, just like a tango. Hmm.
It did take a turn. It took a very dark turn. Like you said, it starts off super innocent, super fun, definitely a little bit flirty back and forth. And then all of a sudden, it takes a completely dark turn the second she brings up Mark's wife, and then goes as far as to call her by the wrong name and calls her Hannah instead of Gemma. You instantly see the smiles disappear from both of their faces. You instantly hear the music get a lot more serious in tone. Everything about the scene changed the second she said Hannah instead of Gemma. And you can see the look on Mark's face. He was not very happy after that. At that point forward, he was distraught. He was disturbed even a little bit as to what exactly was going on here. Why is she bringing up my wife? What started off as a simple, innocent, flirty conversation quickly took a dark turn. And it was interesting how it was this scene and it was this dark turn that ultimately convinced Mark to go ahead with Ragabi's plan to speed up the reintegration. At first, he didn't want to do it. He didn't want to risk it. He was afraid of the hemorrhaging. He was afraid of, bleeding to death. Who wouldn't be afraid of that? But after this happens and he hears his wife's name invoked, he gets to the point where he's ready and he's willing to undergo this dangerous procedure because he wants his memories back that much. He is that desperate to learn all of the information he can on Gemma / Miss Casey that he's willing to take this risk because Helena brought that up. She indirectly caused him to undergo this procedure, where I imagine if he didn't have this conversation with Helena, maybe he never would have decided to let Ragabi do that. I think this is ultimately what led him to that decision.
I think you're right on point. I didn't think about that. And now that you mention it, I think that's exactly it. Because he does know that his wife is being held by Lumen, and he just totally changes when she mentions his wife. And
Yeah.
she mentions she died, right? And I imagine that must remind him, no, she didn't. You're holding her
Yeah.
hostage. She didn't die.
Exactly.
And so he rushes home, right, to have this procedure done. I didn't think about it that way, but now that you mention it, I think you're right. That makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of
It
sense.
makes
Yeah.
it kind of fits, I think. Yeah, it's a again, it spurs him into action in a sense. And yeah, I mean, the second he hears Helena Eagan, who is like she even says it, I'm kind of in charge of the place, she says to Mark. And then now he's hearing her say his wife's name, the wrong name at that. And I imagine he's left to think, wait a minute, you're in charge of the company that faked my wife's death? It just completely changed the entire dynamic of their conversation. And I do ultimately believe that was the final straw that gave Mark the courage to let Ragabi do this extra procedure. And boy, the extra procedure was very interesting, to say the least. He finally decides to do it. He goes back into the makeshift laboratory that's in his freaking basement of all places. And now bear in mind, these are tools and machinery and equipment that Ragabi has to literally bang in order to get it to work, like it's a 90s TV. But yeah, he allows her to do it. And we get this nasty, nasty scene of her cracking open his skull to expose the hole that's already in his brain from the initial severance procedure. And she goes ahead and floods the chip. And it's pretty interesting because it does kind of work right away. Like as soon as it happens, she says it should be pretty quick. And as soon as it happens, he instantly gets a memory of any Mark sleeping with Helly. That's the first thing he remembers is any Mark and Helly having their own little mini Orbo inside the office, even with their own little makeshift tent that they make. And he's quickly gaining back memories. And he even has a quick flash of how Mark and Helena also slept with each other on the Orpo. So he has this procedure done, and now the first thing he's thinking of, the first thing he's remembering is that, shit, my innie's going around having all kind of sex. What's going on at that place? You know, like, what's going on here? So yeah, it initially works. He has another flash of Miss Casey in the hallway, and then all of a sudden things start to get a little bit different. We see that he's clearly a little bit distraught, clearly a little bit out of sorts after what just happened. But as soon as he gets upstairs, it's almost like he instantly just starts looking like death. Like, look at him, look at his face. He's sweating, he's got bags under his eyes. He instantly looks horrible after it happens. And then unfortunately, that leads to him passing out. Well, even before he passes out, he starts realizing that he's losing his motor skills. He's losing all of his motor function, where he can't even pick up a glass because his brain is so messed up and so tweaked at this moment. And then, of course, he passes out and starts convulsing. Now, I guess this is going to be interesting to see how this plays out. I don't think this is Mark dying by any means. I mean, he's the main character of the show. I don't think Mark is going to die anytime soon. So whatever's happening to him, I do think he will survive it. But I did get a few comments in the comment section the other day of people actually believing that Mark is going to die here. But I just don't think that's the case. I think it's way too soon to kill off a character like Mark. He's the focal point of this show, and there's so much unfinished business to do with his storyline. They can't kill him off right now. It would literally kill the whole show. So I do think he will survive this, but it's going to be interesting to see what the outcome is going to be. What is the full outcome going to be of his complete reintegration when it is finally done? How are these feelings all going to shape up? What's going to be left when he's done? Will he just all of a sudden have feelings for Helly and Gemma? Or will one of those loves start to die out? Will the outie or the innie become a little bit more dominant than the other, and he'll only have feelings for one of them? This is going to be very interesting once reintegration is completely done. And then what happens to Innie Mark and Outie Mark? They were clearly two very different people. Now all of a sudden they're merged into one. Does he just have the personality of Innie and Outie Mark kind of merged into one? Like, how is this all going to play out? Does one of them get consumed by the other? Does he have feelings for both Helly and Gemma going forward? This is what I'm looking forward to seeing. Which one is he ultimately going to end up with? And will he at some point be forced to ignore his love for one of them to be with the other, if he does have feelings for both of them when the reintegration is done?
Wow. Speechless. Those are all really great questions. But as far as him dying, I agree with you. I think that Cold Harbor, right, has been made to be a huge deal. And like you told us the other day, Cold Harbor is the title episode of the finale, is it?
Yes.
So I don't think they're gonna kill him, right? They need him.
Yeah.
I don't think he's gonna die. But as far as all the other questions, like who is he going to love? Because these are very separate people. And from what we have seen, they're separate to the point where they have feelings for Annie is in love with Helly. He's in love. I would say that he loves her. Um
Yeah.
and obviously we know that Outie Mark, he was so in love, so profoundly in love with Gemma. He gave us that beautiful line of, after she died, every day felt like a year. He felt like he was choking on her ghost. That's
Yeah.
profound love. So
Yeah.
it's not only love, but it's love to a point where it is so profound. Innie is only there for Helly. That's what Mark, the actor, said in the after show little recap that they do, that Mark's motivation to be in there is Helly. So this is a profound sort of love. What happens? Do you have to forget someone? I don't even have an answer for that. I have no idea. So, do you have an idea of what could happen, or do you just have the question?
hmm I don't. I mean, it's going to be interesting to see which way it plays out. I have no idea which way it is ultimately going to go. It's tough. I mean, part of me always kind of rooted for any Mark and Helly. I feel like I just like their relationship. I like their dynamic. I feel like they're just one of those couples you want to root for. And we haven't really seen Gemma on the show. That's the thing. We've seen Miss Casey. We know that Miss Casey is definitely a very kind of robotic. She doesn't have much of a personality. Her Innie definitely has little to no experience with anything other than being a wellness counselor. So we don't really know Gemma yet. I mean, we've heard some stories about Gemma that tell us that she is a genuine and good person, just based on the stories that you told me through Rickon, that Rickon states in his book, that Gemma was the only one that wouldn't make fun of his work, the only one that would give him that positive reinforcement. So we can gather that Gemma was a very good person, but we just don't know her yet. We have no idea what kind of person she really is. So part of me does want to see Mark and Helly ultimately end up together. But I don't know. I don't know. And I mentioned this the other day, but part of me, again, would think it would be so interesting and such a Shakespearean tragedy if they went through all of this trouble. They go through a incredibly tough journey to finally rescue Miss Casey, only to find out that the Gemma persona is gone. It's been deleted. It's been clean slated. There's nothing left. It's been reset. And now the only personality that's left is Miss Casey. I just feel like that'd be such a bittersweet ending to their story, to finally rescue you. You found out, first of all, you find out your wife is alive when you thought she was dead. That in and of itself is incredibly profound. Then you go on this long journey to hopefully rescue her, only to finally get her out of there, only to realize that you can never recover your wife ever again, that Miss Casey is all that remains. I mean, it would be a sad ending, but I think that would be a very interesting ending if they played it that way. Rescuing Miss Casey, only to find out that Gemma can never be brought back.
My gosh. Yes, I recall you saying that. And I also recall it was on Discord after the watch party that you stated how in your video, the recap, you stated that we do see a picture of Gemma when he's refining and her levels of temper. So
Yeah.
you mentioned if that is the fact that he is working on Gemma, it would be that he has refined Miss Casey to the point where Gemma is gone. So not only would it be that Gemma is not there anymore, it's all just Miss Casey, but that he erased her himself, I believe you stated, which to me, it's even more tragic. It's even more tragic because then he would know that all of the work that he was doing was erasing his wife, deleting who she is.
Yeah. Yeah, it would be super tragic, wouldn't it be, if that is what they were ultimately refining, where Mark is doing this Cold Harbor file only to realize that he's literally erasing his wife and creating Miss Casey. Like, super tragic if that turned out to be the case. That would be so nuts. Ah, my God.
I know, but I do think that you're right because, like you stated, there is a picture of Miss Casey when he's doing the refining with her
Yeah.
levels in 68%. So what
Yeah.
else could it be? I don't like it. I think it's a tragic
Yeah.
twist and it's heartbreaking, but I think you're right. He's working on his own wife, potentially deleting his own wife, which
Oh
is
my God.
insane. And
It
by
is
the way, chat, join
insane.
Jeremy's Discord because you could talk to him directly. And this is from
Indeed.
Discord from the watch party. So
Mhm.
I put the link in the chat. Join the Discord. It's super fun.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, we have a ton of fun in the Discord. There's always something going on in the Discord in terms of, fans theory crafting, talking about predictions, talking about the episodes, not just of Severance, but of all the shows that we cover here on the channel, whether it's From, House of the Dragon, Shogun, Yellow Jackets, all kind of stuff is going on in there. We have a ton of fun in the Discord. And every Friday night at 9 p.m. Eastern, Ravener has been hosting live watch parties for Severance. So if anybody wants to join us every Friday night for a live viewing of the latest episode of Severance, of course, everybody is welcome to come and hang out. I'm super thankful for the Discord. You guys have turned that Discord into one of the biggest fan hubs for theory crafting for all of these fandoms, whether it's From, Severance, anything else we cover here. It really has become a huge place for fans to gather and talk all things about the shows that we like. So definitely hop on into the Discord if you haven't already. Everybody is welcome there. And we do tend to do tons of other watch parties and stuff there every once in a while as well, just kind of out of the blue. And we will continue to be doing that throughout this year. But yeah, man, what an episode! What an episode indeed. Severance definitely continues to impress. It continues to surprise me, and that's one thing I really enjoy about a show. Once a show starts getting predictable, it starts getting boring. But when a show can keep you on their toes like this, when a show can kind of constantly keep you guessing, where is this going to go? How is that going to play out? That is the mark of some really good writing, when it's not predictable. And that's one thing I like about Severance. There are some aspects and some theories that might be predictable and obvious every once in a while. But in terms of the overall scope of the show, it is very unpredictable, and it's hard to tell where it's going to go from episode to episode, especially now that we're in season 2 and we are in the adolescent phase, where season 1 was the child phase. It really is up in the air in terms of where this is going to go, how dark is it going to get, what other problems are going to arise. But either way, I am loving the structure of the show so far. I love how season 2 is, again, their adolescent years, where they're coming into their own, they're exploring themselves and their bodies a little bit more, finding out what it means to be human, which is something every teenager goes through. And they've been killing it. They've been killing it up until this point. I've really enjoyed every episode. I can't look at a single episode and honestly say, I hated that episode in season 2. I've genuinely enjoyed every episode up until this point. Obviously, I've enjoyed some more than others, but I can't point to one episode where I can say, I hated that episode. It was all filler. Something happens every single week, and I really enjoy that.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, for sure. No, I love this show. It's definitely super unique. And talking about From, since you mentioned From, you guys, because I know that there's a lot of the family in the chat. Super exciting. So join the Discord, because on there you will be able to see straight from, right? The man in yellow, the person we're all obsessed with. The other day, Jeremy gets a message on his man in yellow video from the man in yellow himself, saying, you should ask him yourself, Jeremy. Super spooky. Jeremy, like it's super personal too. Not Jeremy Eisenfire, Jeremy. Like he knows him. He's watching. The man in yellow is always watching. And I thought that was super awesome. You'll be able to see it on the Discord. Doug Hughes. That's right, Bill Chill. That's
Hughes.
His name.
Yeah. That's his name.
He has his picture on there, and it was super spooky. It's like, why don't you ask him yourself, Jeremy? Which I love. And I was kind of, like teasing Jeremy, like the man in yellow is asking Jeremy for an interview instead of the other way around. He's asking like, Jeremy, why don't you talk to me? And I totally love that. So you'll be able to see that on the Discord. That was super cool.
Yes. That was super cool. It was something that I was not expecting. It did kind of just come out of left field, where, yes, we saw a comment from the actor playing the man in yellow himself. And yes, you said it perfectly. He says, why don't you ask the man himself, Jeremy? So apparently the man in yellow wants to do an interview. So I am emailing him. I am emailing his manager. And I imagine we'll set something up and we will do a man in yellow interview right here on the channel. Interview with actors is something that I never really pursued. It was something that I never really tried to do, because I know there's a lot of other channels that do that, and I kind of always want to do stuff differently, I guess. I don't want to be doing the same old thing as everybody else. But when the man in yellow himself requests an interview, I mean, how can I say no? How can I say no to that? I am I'm super honored. I am so honored that he even thought of that. So yes, I'm going to send that email, and I am going to try and set something up, and hopefully we will get the man in yellow here either on a live stream, or maybe I'll do it pre-recorded, And we will ask the Man in Yellow some pertinent questions as to where from season 4 is going to go and where his character is ultimately going to go, or where he thinks his character is going to go. Because I imagine he probably doesn't know a whole lot in terms of what's happening in season 4. Most of the actors don't. John Griffin seems to be playing a lot of things close to the chest in terms of not telling the actors a whole lot. So if you guys have any specific questions that you would like to see me ask the Man in Yellow, leave those questions in the Discord, in the Fromville section, and I will definitely check out all of these suggested questions tomorrow, and I will definitely try to work as many of them into my questions as I can. But yeah, that was super cool. Super honored to know that anybody would ever want an interview with little old me. So I'm super honored for that. And again, how can I say no when the Man in Yellow himself asks?
I don't think you're even allowed to say no.
Not allowed.
Like Interface says in the chat, he's like, you shouldn't be digging that hole, Jeremy. I told you not to look for answers. I thought it was super cool because the Man in Yellow like puts a winky face at the end, like winking at Jeremy. And that's right. Just the coolest things happen to Jeremy, really. The Man in Yellow asking you for an interview, I think that's super cool. I'm still like geeking out about it because I'm a fan of the Man in Yellow. I think that he's like the most awesome character and really we didn't really get to see a lot of him. It was what, like 2 minutes of him, but he had such a profound like you know, like dynamic with the family. Everybody went crazy for the Man in Yellow. We were all obsessed. So, and I know that Jeremy doesn't like to do interviews, but I thought that this was super cool. He's being forced into one, basically, by the Man in Yellow, and I love it. I love it for him.
Well, thank you for that. I do very much appreciate that. That does mean a lot to me. And yeah, we're gonna do it. We're gonna see if we can get the Man in Yellow on here. We'll see what kind of schedule works best for him, and hopefully we can have a pretty fun, laid back but kick-ass interview with the man, the myth, the legend himself. And again, any kind of suggestions, any specific questions that you guys want to see the Man in Yellow answer, or at least asked, definitely leave your suggestions and your questions in the Fromville section in the Discord, and I definitely will take a look at all of those tomorrow, and I will try and work in as many as I can to my own questions, because I am thinking of questions that he hasn't been asked before, because I know he's done a ton of interviews, which is super cool. I love how engaged he is with the fandom. It seems like he's super invested and really loves this character that he's playing. And I love seeing an actor get that excited about the role that they're in, especially when it is such a big role like that on such a big established show. So I love the way that he's approaching it. And I definitely want this interview to be different than all of the other interviews he's done where he gets asked the kind of same old questions. Mine are going to be different. Mine are going to be unique. And I'm going to try and come up with the coolest questions that hopefully he hasn't been asked before. But if you guys do have any suggestions, again, leave them in the Discord and I will work in as many as I possibly can. But yeah, I'll keep everybody informed. Once we do nail down a date, I will definitely, of course, announce it in the Discord so everybody knows exactly when and where the Man in Yellow interview will be going down.
Yeah,
But
and I
thank you
think
again.
what's really cool. Oh, sorry.
No, please.
Oh, I just to piggyback of what you were saying. What I think is really cool of him reaching out to you and the interview happening and all of this is that now he has had time to reflect. And now he has had time to maybe catch up on the fandom and the fandom's ideas and theories. So that gives us the opportunity to talk to him in reflection of maybe things that he might have forgotten or new things that he has uncovered or theories of his own, right? So super cool. I'm so excited for it.
I am too. I'm looking forward to it. Again, it's usually never something I thought I would do here on the channel. It's not something I ever pursued. I get a lot of requests for interviews. It's just never really quite been my thing. But no, we're gonna do it. We're gonna do this one. This is a special one. You know, anytime you have someone like the Man in Yellow asking you, humble little old you, yeah, we're going to do it. We're going to have a fun time diving into some awesome From stuff and see just where potentially the Man in Yellow's character could be going in season 4. So I am very much looking forward to that. And again, I will keep everybody posted and informed on when and where it will exactly happen. But I want to thank everybody again for joining us on this fine Saturday night evening. And before we close the door and get ready to prepare for episode 7 of Severance, we have to, of course, ask the chat and our wonderful guest, our wonderful co-host, PM, one thing we ask every single week, and that is, of course, how did you guys rate episode 6 of Severance on a scale from 1 to 10, with 1 being horrible and 10 being perfect? What score do you guys give episode 6 of Severance? PM, where would you be ranking this one?
I'm going to say 8. I liked it, and I could not give anybody or any episode more than I gave I'm Gonna Kill Him as a Milkshake, because that's still my favorite. So this has to be an 8, because I gave that one a 9.
Oh, you give that one a 9? Okay, interesting. No, that's actually a very good metric to kind of to guide your scores by, because that episode really was just so epic. It had so many good lines, so many memorable lines, great dialogue. I'm gonna kill her, Mr. Milkshake, and do it, Seth. I love it. I absolutely love the one-liners in that episode. But for me, episode 6, yes, I think I'm right there with you. I'm going to give it an 8 as well. I think an 8 is a solid score for an episode like this. I can't give it an 8.5 or a 9 personally, but I can give it an 8. I can definitely give it an 8. A lot of good stuff happened. We finally saw Mark. We saw a lot of our characters actually going through some personal growth in this episode. We see Mark kind of finally building up the courage to tell Helly the truth, which he should have done. He made the right move finally. We see Milchick trying to go through his own twisted version of growth himself, where he's trying to mold himself into becoming this perfect Lumen boss. And we saw Helly kind of rediscover who she was in this episode as well, where at first the news of what Helena did with Mark kind of hurt her. It kind of broke her down a little bit. But ultimately, she got up, she got back on the horse, and she remembered who she was. And that is the Helly that takes charge and doesn't wait for anybody to tell her what to do. So it was a really good episode of growth that was woven all throughout the episode. We got a lot of interesting stuff to look forward to in terms of Irving and Burt. Where is that going to shake up? What is going on with Burt? Did he set up Irving so Drummond could search his apartment? Is there something deeper going on with Burt? Did he really work for Lumen for 20 years and he is this kind of setup? What exactly is going on? And of course, who is Irving working with? And is Irving a part of the Whole Mind group? And are they planning something against Lumen? A lot of big questions, a lot of interesting plot details that we have to look forward to over these next 4 episodes. So yeah, I got to give it a solid 8. A solid 8 for me. But let's see what you guys are saying. Where did you guys rate this episode? We got a 9 out of 10 from James Buckley. We got a 9 from Mary Sue. We got a 9 watermelons from Amy. We got an 8 in the chat. We got a 7.8. We got 500 pepper shakers. Hey, 500 if the pepper shaker is your thing, then by all means, 500 pepper shakers.
Love it.
Episode, love it too. That's a good one. Episode 5 was 10 out of 10, says Mary Sue. Ooh, interesting. That's cool. Awesome. Glad you enjoyed it. We got an 8 from Thomas. We got a 7 heaps of corn from FaZe.
A pile of corn.
Awesome stuff. Awesome stuff. We got a 9, a good solid 9 in the chat. We got another 9 barrettes. Good stuff. Good stuff. We got a 7.5. It's higher if I weren't neurotic about relationship issues. The whole episode was about relationships. This was an episode that did focus heavily on the relationships of Severance and how they ultimately are affected by each other, but also by how they're affected by the outside world and how the innies are affected by the outies and vice versa. So yes, it very much was a relationship focused episode for sure. For sure. We got a 9 in the chat from Pam Jam. Matt giving it an 8.5. We got another 9 Barrett. We got another 8.5. Pretty high scores for the most part, which is what I love to see. I'm loving that people are enjoying the season so far. We got an 8 out of 10, another 8. Another 8 from Xavier. Awesome, awesome, awesome. I hope no cliffhangers this season in episode 10. Yeah, that'll be interesting to see how they end the season. Will we get another giant cliffhanger to end the season, or will they end the season on a little bit more of a definitive note? I'm with you in terms of not always wanting cliffhangers, but a show like Severance, I guess I won't be surprised if there is another cliffhanger to end the season. What about you, PM? How do you feel on cliffhangers where Severance is concerned? Season 1 ended off on a pretty interesting cliffhanger with the OTC happening. Would you like to see another cliffhanger for season 2, or would you like to see a different ending?
I mean, they don't do it often, right? I will give them that in most of the episodes. They don't make us wait. They kind of resolve things. So if they need a cliffhanger, if they do that, I will be okay with it because they haven't been doing it to us constantly. And it kind of is the way of a finale, right? It kind of, that is just the way of a finale. I'll be surprised if they don't, but I'm okay. I'm okay with the cliffhanger. I think I will accept it.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at as well. I mean, at this point, as long as it's a really good cliffhanger, I don't think I would mind too much. I would accept it. And I think, I don't know, I guess part of me wouldn't be surprised either if it does end on a cliffhanger, just by the very nature of the show, the mystery nature of some of these aspects. I wouldn't be too surprised at all if we get another cliffhanger, but as long as it's a good one, yeah, I'd be totally fine with it as well. But we got our first 10 in the chat. Michelle Miller giving it a 10 because Christopher Walken scared me. Awesome acting. He really is so good. I mean, and he was a little bit scary, a little bit menacing in this episode. Even when he's not trying to be menacing, he still can be a little bit menacing. It's just his presence, his aura, the facial expressions. He can be a scary dude when he wants to be. And yes, phenomenal acting from Christopher Walken as always. No cliffhangers, then wait 3 years. That's a good point. When you're waiting 2 or 3 years in between seasons, then cliffhangers become much more unbearable. I do agree with you there. It's one thing when you're getting a season the very next year, but yeah, when you're waiting this long in between seasons, as long as people waited between seasons 1 and 2 of Severance, then that kind of wait can put a little bit more strain on a cliffhanger. So I do agree with you there. The shorter the wait, the easier the cliffhanger is to take, for sure. For sure. Awesome stuff, guys. Awesome stuff. And of course, rounding it out, we got Makida giving it a 9. Solid, respectable score indeed. And it looks like the poll is done. I'm going to close the poll, and it looks like 97% of you. Holy cow. 97% of you think that Burt is indeed sus. I don't know if we've ever done a poll that's been that one-sided. I don't know if I don't ever recall seeing 97% agreeing on anything, and that's with almost 100 votes. So wow. 97%. Holy shit. Wow.
That's awesome. I'm gonna go with you guys because, like I said, Jeremy's chat knows all. He's probably going to be a villain then. I'm just gonna go with you guys. Yeah.
The chat tends to be right far more often than they're wrong. The chat, again, you guys always come up with some of the best theories I've seen in this entire fandom. And yes, you guys are often right. And it's always fun to dive into these things and see what you guys have to say and think as well. But yeah, 97% of you on 95 votes say that Burt is indeed sus. Oof, man, I got a fever, and the only prescription is more cowbell. So we're going to have to keep an eye. What is going to happen with Christopher Walken's character? Is he ultimately sus? Is he laying some kind of trap for Irving? I guess we will find out over these next few weeks and over these next few episodes just who exactly Burt is and what his true intentions really are. And I cannot wait to find out what those are indeed. But again, awesome stuff tonight. Great episode, as always. Awesome stream. You guys always kill it and bring some of the best thoughts and theories that I've ever seen, and I cannot appreciate each and every one of you enough for taking some time out of your busy day to come and hang out with us, especially on the weekend. People have free time. You guys could be anywhere else in the world, so I am so appreciative that you chose to spend even just a little time with us. Very much appreciate it. And we will be live again, same time, same channel, right here next week, every single Saturday at 9 p.m. Eastern. PM and I will be diving into all things Severance every week. And hopefully you guys come back and join us for the next one as we dive into episode 7 and look forward to episode 7, which has a pretty interesting title, which refers to Bardo. And of course, anyone who has ever read up a little bit on Bardo in the Tibetan Buddhism vein, it is basically a state between death and rebirth. So I wonder, how is Bardo going to weave into the next episode? What is that title going to be referring to? And when you think of death and rebirth, the innies and severance definitely do come to mind in a sense. When you are becoming a severed individual, you technically are having a rebirth of sorts, a birth of somebody else that you're sharing your body with, that two consciousness and two conscience in one body. So in a sense, yes, I guess you could say severance and rebirth do have some interesting similarities. So I guess it will be pretty fun to see what exactly Bardo is going to be referring to in episode 7. I cannot wait. But again, thank you, each and every one of you, for joining us. I hope everybody enjoys the rest of their weekend. I hope everybody enjoys their Sunday and the rest of their Saturday. And as always, big thank you to each and every one of you for joining us. And stay safe out there, ladies and gents. Watch out for all of those lumon cleaners and those lumon fixers like Mr. Drummond. Do not let Mr. Frolic get you. And until next time, keep those tinfoil hats on, folks, and I will see you on the next one.